Tonight on Dark Sleep Radio, we're exploring true stories of encounters with beings from other worlds. As you settle in for another evening of otherworldly tales, I'm here to guide you into peaceful slumber with these fascinating accounts. I always enjoy knowing where our listeners are joining us from, so drop a comment about your location. Our community spans the globe, and it's wonderful to connect with each of you who tune in to share these moments of mystery and relaxation. Take a moment now to find your perfect spot, whether that's curled up in bed, stretched out on the couch, or wherever you feel most at ease. Once you're comfortable, let these stories carry you away into the gentle darkness of night. A weird July storm in Springfield kicked off one of the strangest nights of my life. You know those summer evenings where the air feels like a hot, sticky blanket and the sky turns a deep purple? That's exactly how it started. I was out on my back porch with a beer, doing what I always did during storms, just watching and relaxing. Thunder shook the window frames as dark clouds tumbled over each other like waves. Lightning lit up the sky in quick flashes, followed by deep rumbles. It should have been peaceful. Storms usually are for me, but something didn't feel right that night. Then I saw it. Among the normal, jagged lightning bolts, there was this one strange line. It looked like someone had taken a white pencil and drawn a perfectly straight line from the clouds to the horizon. The weird part? It didn't disappear like regular lightning. It just hung there, glowing. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks? I blinked hard and shook my head, but that bright white line was still there. Just when I thought it might be some rare weather phenomenon, the line moved. It curved slightly like it was alive, then shot sideways across the sky before vanishing behind the clouds. No lightning moves like that. It was too precise, too controlled. The rain started hitting the porch roof as the storm got closer. With each new lightning flash, I searched the sky for that strange line. While it didn't show up again, I started noticing something else. Odd, dim flashes at random angles. They weren't normal lightning, more like light bouncing off something metal up in the clouds. That's when I decided to head inside and grab the storm started normally enough. Just rain and typical lightning flashes. I stood by my window watching the clouds roll in, sipping a beer when something caught my eye. A strange line in the sky, different from regular lightning. The rain was getting heavier, so I grabbed my phone to take a picture from the doorway. But by then, the downpour was too thick to see anything clearly. That's when the weird feeling started. Like someone was watching me even though I was alone. The air felt heavy, almost solid. I backed inside as the wind picked up, whipping against the house. Sitting by the window, I tried to focus on the normal storm sounds. The thunder, the regular lightning flashes. I kept waiting for whatever I'd seen to appear again. Then I saw it, not the line this time, but a shape moving through the clouds. Just a dark silhouette at first, gliding sideways across the sky. It moved silently, against the flow of the clouds, before disappearing behind the storm cover. What struck me was the lack of thunder. In all that noise, the silence stood out. I started pacing around the living room, telling myself it was just my imagination. The storm sounded normal again, but I couldn't stop looking outside. The air had that wet metallic smell that comes right before lightning, but no strike followed. Just this weird tension, like the storm was holding something back. I tried to act normal, got another beer, but things kept catching my eye. Little things that weren't right, white flashes in the clouds that weren't lightning, perfectly straight lines hanging in the air, shadows where they shouldn't be. The strangest part was how it seemed to react when I looked at it. Finally, I went outside for a better look. The rain soaked me instantly, but I stood there anyway, staring at the darkest part of the sky. That's when everything changed. The air felt different. Not hotter or colder, just thicker, and the lightning started moving in a new pattern. The first strange flash caught my eye during that January night storm in Springfield. Not the usual zigzag lightning, these were different, like gnawls cutting through the darkness. Thunder cracked overhead, making me jump, and in that moment, I spotted it, a thin, white vertical line slicing through the storm clouds. The line curved slightly, then shot sideways across the sky faster than anything I'd ever seen. No thunder followed. It just vanished. My skin tingled, arm hair standing on end, and I bolted inside, locking the door behind me. I collapsed onto the couch, heart racing, as the storm gradually returned to normal, regular lightning. Typical thunder rolls. From my window, everything looked ordinary again. Rain-soaked streets, glowing streetlights, typical storm clouds. My phone showed only 15 minutes had passed since that first sighting, though it felt like hours. I wanted to tell someone, but who would believe a story about lightning that moved sideways? Even I questioned what I'd seen. That unsettling feeling lingered long after the rain stopped. By bedtime, stars were peeking through clearing skies. Before closing my blinds, I took one last look up, and there it was again, a faint white streak against the stars, moving with an unnatural precision before disappearing. I've mentioned it to friends over drinks or in texts. They dismiss it, suggesting I was tired or seeing things. Maybe they're right, but I can't watch storms the same way anymore. Every time dark clouds gather over Springfield, I find myself studying their movements, analyzing each lightning strike, waiting for that line to reappear. Sometimes I catch glimpses of it, cutting through the sky like something that doesn't belong in our world. Whatever I saw that cold night out of Fargo, alone in my freight train cab with frost coating the controls, it wasn't natural. The empty train rolled on through the darkness, but that image stayed with me. I still can't explain it, but I know what I saw wasn't any ordinary storm phenomenon. The T. Racks looked normal under the street lamp that night, with snow falling evenly around us. I was at the controls, doing my regular run with the usual cargo cars. The snow was light, just enough to create that perfect quiet outside, while the tracks caught the dim glow of our headlamp. I've been a conductor for 20 years. Trees down, wild animals, strange weather. I've seen it all. But what happened that night was different. It started when I spotted something while scanning for the next signal. About a mile ahead, there was this shape, just hovering above the tracks. At first I didn't move, thinking it must be a maintenance crane or maybe a drone. But this thing was different. No lights, no tethers, just this large, dark mass floating silently over the rails. I shut my eyes tight, rubbed them, looked again. Still there. The darkness and snow made it hard to judge its size, but it felt massive, the way things do when they're not supposed to be there at all. I tried the radio, hoping someone would answer, but got nothing but static. My hands gripped the throttle tight as I kept slowing down. When we got within half a mile, the thing started disappearing, like it was dissolving into thin air. No sound, no wind change, no rush of air. It just vanished. Muttering to myself, I eased the train forward. When we reached where it had been, I noticed something strange. The rails were hot, so hot my gloves couldn't block it. The air was freezing, barely 20 degrees, but those rails felt like they'd been under a forge. The heat stretched about 20 feet in both directions, then stopped. It made no sense. No trains had passed through for hours. I headed back to the cab, still rubbing my hands, glancing around nervously. I kept driving, but couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. Not like some animal in the woods, but something else entirely. The incident started during my night shift on the rails. I first noticed something was wrong when I felt an unusual warmth in the tracks. Steel that should have been ice cold in January was radiating heat. My stomach was in knots, even though everything else seemed normal. Clear tracks, aligned switches, blinking signals. The warmth stayed with me as I drove. I kept checking the rails with my gloved hand when we slowed for curves, and they remained mysteriously warm. Through the snowfall, I kept scanning the surroundings, my breath quick and shallow in the cab. At one point, passing a small siding with some old cars, I caught what looked like movement, maybe someone standing on top of one of the cars. But when I looked directly, there was nothing there, just snow and abandoned vehicles. I kept glancing up through the windshield, half expecting to spot a dark shape hovering behind or beside the train. The snow made visibility tough, and I tried to convince myself it was just reflections from my cab lights playing tricks on me. Still, I found myself gripping the wheel tighter than usual. At the next yard, I called in a report, choosing my words carefully. When the dispatcher asked if I meant vehicle or debris, I just said, "No, nothing physical, just strange heat and maybe something I can't explain." He let it go, just told me to log it. Later, I tried to make sense of it all. I considered maintenance crews, weather patterns, snow reflections, but nothing added up. The warm rails were the real puzzle. Steel doesn't just heat up in freezing weather without a source. The next day, I went back with an infrared thermometer. The rails were just cold metal now, exactly what you'd expect in winter. Whatever had been there was gone without a trace. When I carefully mentioned it to some coworkers during coffee break, they just laughed nervously, suggesting tired eyes playing tricks. I dropped it. They hadn't seen what I had. The Mojave Desert stretches endlessly on late-night drives, with stars so bright they make you forget you're on asphalt. That's where I was, somewhere between Barstow and Baker, pushing through the night air that still carried the day's dry weight. I'd left Barstow around 9, aiming to reach my friend's place before midnight. The radio was dead, but I didn't mind. The desert's quiet suited me just fine. Every now and then, wind would sweep across the flatlands and shake my mirrors, making me check the rear view like something might be back there. About 50 miles outside Barstow, I spotted it, a shimmer hovering over the road like those heat waves you see during the day. Then it was gone, vanishing as if it had never existed. The rails underneath had warmed up somehow, though I couldn't explain why. I drove that route again a few nights later, scanning the horizon the whole time. Nothing looked out of place, but I couldn't shake the image of those rails heating up under some invisible presence. The tension would grip me every time I passed that spot. I checked both the cab camera and signal camera at the siding, but neither showed anything unusual. Whatever it was had appeared just long enough to leave that warmth, then vanished without a trace. Work got busier and I thought about it less, but I'd still catch myself staring out windows at night, watching the tracks, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. That section of steel feels different even now. During inspections, when I touch those rails, I remember that strange warmth, though it's long since cooled. I've made dozens of trips down that route since then. I've seen all sorts of things: deer, snow, ice, even blocked sidings, but never anything like that shape again. I keep it to myself because it sounds crazy when I try to explain it. Still, every night passage through that spot starts with me checking the horizon, that same unease creeping back in. I can't explain what it was, why it appeared, or what made those rails warm. I just know it happened. For one brief moment, the world seemed less certain, and that quiet stretch of track carried something beyond words. It started with a strange shimmer on the highway, something that looked like it belonged in broad daylight but was there in the dark night instead. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just highway sign reflections, or heat rising from the warm asphalt. But as I kept driving, something felt deeply wrong about what I was seeing. The anomaly hovered about 15 feet above the road, with this weird wavering outline that seemed to bend light around itself. When I shone my headlights at it, they passed right through. It wasn't solid, but it definitely wasn't nothing either. Just this strange distortion in the air. My phone was charging in the passenger seat, battery at 78%. The moment I reached for it to take a photo, everything went weird. The screen went black as soon as I unlocked it. After hitting the power button several times, it finally came back on, but now showing 9%. I couldn't wrap my head around that sudden drain. I kept moving forward, pulled by curiosity, but maintaining distance. The thing seemed to notice me, shifting slightly sideways like it was studying my approach. The silence was unsettling. No hum, no wind, nothing at all. Just this oscillating heat haze suspended over the road. Even for a desert night, the quiet felt unusually heavy. Then it started moving. First, it lifted slowly like a curtain being raised. I gripped the wheel tighter, slowing down even more. Some instinct told me not to stop completely. Without warning, it shot straight up into the black sky, faster than anything I'd ever seen, with no blur or sonic boom. Just gone. My heart was pounding as I tried to process what had happened. The road where it had been looked completely normal now. My phone still showed 9%, with no signal or service. I told myself it was just heat and stress playing tricks on me, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. The strangeness wasn't over. About 10 miles later, I spotted movement along the roadside. Small, darting shadows. The desert drive started normally enough, just my headlights cutting through the darkness. Then I noticed strange shapes darting back and forth between the mosque bushes. They weren't coyotes or rabbits. These forms were too big, too quick, too coordinated. They seemed to float above the ground, like the desert floor bent around them. Every time I tried to get a better look, they'd disappear into the night. My phone stayed stuck at 9%. With no signal or GPS, the isolation out there felt crushing. A shimmer appeared in the distance, off to the left side of the road, hovering above a dry wash. This one was smaller, more like a heat wave than the earlier distortions. I couldn't judge its height, and I didn't want to get closer. My hands were sweaty on the wheel, my heart pounding. The speedometer started acting up, flickering from 65 to 0 before jumping back. I sped past that spot fast. For the next 30 minutes, nothing happened. Just empty desert and darkness. But a tension was building in my chest that I couldn't shake. Usually these drives don't bother me, but something felt different. Then I saw the shimmer again, right above the road ahead. I started noticing patterns. It would appear, hover briefly, then shoot away. I kept my distance, staying about a mile back. Everything in me screamed to turn around, but I couldn't look away. That's when a car showed up behind me. Its headlights were dim, and it moved like it was following me. I tried flashing, my high beams, but got no response. Just this dark shape trailing me. I thought about pulling over, but something told me that would only make things worse. The car kept perfect pace, never changing lanes or passing. My useless phone left me completely alone out there. Then the car vanished. No fading lights, no sound, nothing. Just gone. The night my bedroom lit up at 3 a.m. changed everything. It wasn't the usual streetlight glow through the blinds. This was different. a strange flickering that filled the room. At first, I assumed a car had hit a power line. The street outside was quiet, though, showing the typical empty suburban calm you'd expect at that hour. That's when I saw it, an oval of light hanging in the air about 2 blocks away. The light was completely still. Unlike any normal light source, it just hung there, fixed in place. The drive to Baker that followed was even stranger. The road stretched dark and empty ahead of me, but something felt off. My phone's battery mysteriously stuck at 9%, and in my mirrors, I kept catching glimpses of something that shouldn't have been there. The desert seemed to watch my every move. Baker's lights finally appeared in the distance, a welcome sight of normalcy. As I entered town, my heart was still racing. I pulled into my friend's driveway around midnight, constantly checking the rearview mirror. Once inside, I tried making sense of it all. The phone stayed dead, and I didn't dare step outside again. The weather report showed nothing unusual, no electrical storms or anything that could explain the shimmering distortion I'd seen hovering in the air. I spent the next few days trying to find logical explanations. Heat haze? Some kind of atmospheric phenomenon? But too many pieces didn't add up. My dead phone, shapes moving in the bushes, that phantom car, and the way the distortion moved like it ignored P. Physics altogether? Back home now, I still can't convince myself it wasn't real. The desert's silence at night feels like it's hiding something just beyond view. I avoid driving that road alone now. I rarely share the story, it sounds too crazy. But sometimes driving at night or looking at dark pavement, I catch that faint shimmer hanging in the distance, like it's waiting. And every time I check my phone, I can't help watching the battery life, remembering that night. I know I'll probably never understand what I saw. From my window, a peculiar light caught my attention. Frozen, I doubted my own eyes and reached for my phone. The screen was oddly dim when I checked the time. 3:02 a.m., the battery showed 92%, but something felt off about the display, like a technical hiccup. The strange glow outside began to change. What started as a slow shrinking turned rapid, collapsing into a tiny dot before vanishing entirely. The street returned to its usual nighttime state. Dark houses, quiet air, no unusual sounds. Sleep became impossible after that. I threw on some clothes and stepped outside. The crisp, early morning air hit me, clearing my head better than any cup of coffee. At the end of my driveway, I looked up at the sky. Everything seemed normal. Just stars and blinking streetlights, no unusual aircraft or lights. I crossed to my neighbor's side, thinking someone else might be investigating. But the street was deserted. Not even a porch light broke the darkness. It was as if everyone had collectively paused, then drifted back to sleep. Walking back, I spotted something alarming. My car's headlights were on, though I distinctly remembered turning them off before bed. My hands trembled as I switched them off. I tried to explain it away. Maybe I'd sleepwalked or someone had been there. But the doors were locked, the interior untouched. Inside, my phone showed 27% battery, an impossible drop from the 92% just minutes ago. When I plugged it in, it crept up to 28% as if severely drained. I tried calling my brother, knowing he'd be up gaming, but got nothing but beeps. Sitting on the couch staring outside, I saw it. A dark shape lurked at my neighbor's yard's edge, barely visible in the street lamp's glow. It stayed completely still, crouched low. Not moving like a cat or raccoon would. The moment I shifted for a better view, it sensed my gaze and vanished behind the hedge. I struggled to dismiss it as imagination, but something felt undeniably wrong. I'd been trying to convince myself it was just sleep deprivation making me see things. The night had started normally enough, but then everything changed. The first warning sign came from Oliver, my cat. Instead of his usual peaceful sleep on the bed, he was restless, pacing around, ears perked up, staring intently at the window with his tail twitching. The strange feeling of being watched came next. Every time I looked away from the window, I sensed something lurking just beyond the yard. I retreated inside, closing all the blinds, hoping to find comfort in normal sounds like the humming fridge or distant passing cars. That's when my phone started acting up. Without any notifications, it suddenly buzzed. The battery dropped from 28% to 9% in just 5 minutes. I turned it off and left it on the counter, planning to deal with it later. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every little noise seemed amplified. The air conditioner, wind against the house, even Oliver's soft footsteps on the carpet. I eventually dozed off, though I kept jolting awake at the slightest sound. Morning brought normalcy back to the street. My phone charged normally, reaching 100% without issues. I spent the day looking for answers, scanning the sky and street for anything unusual. My neighbor, W, who walks her dog at 3 a.m., just laughed when I asked if she'd noticed anything strange. suggesting I might have been dreaming. But I know what I saw. That light hovering perfectly still before shrinking and vanishing. Nothing explains it. Not sleep deprivation, not city lights, not even a plane with its lights off. The next night, I took extra precautions, checking all locks and closing the blinds. Oliver stayed unusually alert beside me. Around 2:45 a.m., the street lamp across from my house flickered once, but nothing else happened. That hovering light and my phone's inexplicable battery drain still haunt me. The way it just hung there, completely motionless before contracting, it defies explanation. The memory stays with me, especially the creepy way my phone kept losing power. The minnow was gliding through syrupy calm waters off Maine's northern coast that night. I don't usually take my 24T center console out past 10 o'clock, but the full moon gave plenty of light, and I had fish to clean from earlier trips. The air was bone-chilling cold, the kind no amount of layers can keep out. I was rinsing the deck after getting the lines in when it started. A white beam cut across the water from above the clouds. My first thought was a lighthouse or another boat, but the radar showed nothing. This light was different, too steady, too exact. Instead of swinging or blinking like normal lights do, it moved across the waves like someone drawing with a ruler. I just stood there, frozen. Something about it felt deeply wrong. I've stopped checking outside at night, trying to put it out of my mind. But sometimes when I'm drifting off to sleep, I catch a faint shimmer at the edge of my vision, right where the neighborhood ends. I know if I look directly at it, it'll be gone. Part of me wants to set up cameras, but another part doesn't want proof. I almost wish I could just forge. Oliver still gets nervous at night. He'll stare out windows, ears forward, tail twitching like he's seeing something I can't. I wake up at strange hours with my heart pounding. Nothing obvious has happened since then. Just occasional battery drains and strange lights. But what if it happens again? What if it gets worse? I remember that oval of light. How it shrank until it disappeared. The silence afterward made everything feel wrong, like it wasn't from our world. I've kept quiet about it mostly. Friends would just say I was paranoid or half asleep, but I know what I saw. I know how my phone acted up. And I know Oliver sensed it too. The light hasn't shown up in weeks, maybe months. But on quiet, dark nights, I still find myself looking toward the neighborhood's edge, half expecting to see that motionless shimmer there, watching and waiting. The night started normally enough on the water, until that strange beam appeared. The light made everything wrong. The water beneath it looked bleached, drained of color, nothing like normal moonlight, and cold. The air around that beam sucked the warmth right out of me, leaving my teeth chattering and my hands numb through my gloves. I watched as the light moved in a searching pattern across the water. Looking for me? Something else? I couldn't tell. When it vanished, it didn't fade, just snapped off like a switch. The darkness crashed back in, thick and heavy as a wet blanket over the ocean. My hands fumbled with the controls as I tried to start the engine. Everything in me screamed to leave, but I sat frozen, trying to make sense of it. A helicopter, maybe? A weather drone? But there hadn't been any sound, no motor, no hum, absolutely nothing. The water was back to normal, but colder than before. As I finally headed toward the marina, the waves sounded hollow, wrong. I talked to myself, even yelled at the darkness, hoping it would help. It didn't. Then came the fog, thin wisps rising from the water, but it moved all wrong, pulled along by something invisible instead of drifting with the wind. I felt my eyes were playing tricks until the compass started acting up. The needle twitched, jumping back and forth but never quite leaving north. That's impossible out here, with nothing but my boat's metal around. Getting desperate, I tried the radio. Instead of answers, I got static that morphed into something worse. A steady hiss like someone breathing right into the speaker, inhaling and exhaling in a slow, even rhythm. The night started normally enough at the marina, but everything changed when I noticed that strange glow behind the clouds. It wasn't like any aircraft or navigation light I'd seen before, just a steady, faint brightness like a distant lantern. Then it vanished completely. No fade out, no warning. I told myself I was just tired, that the dark water and cold were playing tricks on my mind. But the deeper I went, the more wrong things felt. The water beneath my boat changed in a way I'd never felt before, not like any current or wave pattern I knew. It moved thicker, heavier, as if I'd crossed from one substance into another. The boat stayed level, but my stomach knew something wasn't right. The sounds around me grew strange too. Every splash against the hull, distant bird call, and engine vibrations seemed too loud, too clear. Even worse was the silence that followed. A hollow quiet that made the whole ocean feel empty. The radio started hissing like breathing, and my compass couldn't stay still. All the while, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched from above. like something was studying me, waiting to see if I'd notice. When I finally reached the familiar lights of the marina, it felt like escaping into safety. I called into the harbor master. B, you'd kept quiet about what I'd seen. Who'd believe me about searching beams of light? Fog that moved with purpose or water that didn't behave like water should. I sat in my cabin afterward, looking out at the now peaceful harbor. Everything looked normal, but I knew that somewhere out there, a piece of ocean had changed, touched by something beyond my understanding. At home, sleep wouldn't come. That white light kept appearing in my mind, sliding across black water with inhuman precision, always searching. The next morning, I checked every inch of my boat. No damage, no strange marks, nothing out of place. But I know what I experienced out there, even if I can't explain it. It was one of those perfect nights at Cedar Hill, the kind where the sky stretches endless and clear, no city lights bleeding in from across the river. The stars were everywhere, more than you'd think possible in that black dome above. The neighborhood had gone completely quiet. No cars, no dogs, not even an AC unit humming in the distance. Just crickets keeping me company while I sat wrapped in a blanket on the back deck, nursing a thermos of coffee after a long day. The memory still haunts me months later. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I picture that searching beam sweeping across my yard, moving with silent precision. I've tried explaining it away, a trick of the mind, weird weather, maybe some aircraft I couldn't see. But nothing quite fits. The cold metallic air, the colorless water, the strange fog, the radio, none of it makes complete sense. I took the boat out a few nights after, trying to find that spot again. There was nothing. No light, no fog, just dark water lying flat and uncaring under the moon. But I can still feel that moment's weight pressing down. It lives in my fingers, my chest, and every breath I took that night. Nothing else had been out there except the usual. Sea life and me. Even the fog had vanished. The boat stays tied up at the marina now, at least after dark. I still make day trips, stick to the familiar routes. But you won't catch me out there past 10 o'clock anymore. Sometimes at dusk, when I'm alone on the water, I feel that beam's presence again. I keep my head low, hands steady, and I move. I've thought about reporting it. To the Coast Guard, scientists, even just telling a friend. But who would believe it the way I remember it? The light was real. The cold was real. The silence was real. Everything else? I'm not sure. And that's what haunts me most. Not the beam itself, but knowing something like that could exist up there, moving with purpose unseen until it simply stops. The effects linger. I see flashes when I blink, hear that faint hiss in quiet rooms. Sometimes I catch myself staring skyward, wondering if whatever it was might be staring back. One night, I noticed something unusual in the sky. Among all the stars, one caught my attention, not because it was particularly bright, but because it looked unusually sharp and clear, as if it was somehow nearer than the others. I was drinking coffee on my deck, occasionally looking up at this peculiar star. The star suddenly flashed 3 times in perfect rhythm, like a signal. My first reaction was to dismiss it as an airplane's lights, but there was no movement, just those 3 distinct flashes before it returned to its steady glow. My whole body tensed up as I watched, now completely alert. After a few seconds of waiting, something even stranger happened. A different light, far across the sky near the tree line, repeated the exact same pattern. 3 identical flashes with the same timing. I kept looking between the 2 points, expecting more signals, but instead, both lights began to fade. It wasn't sudden like clouds passing over them, but a slow, purposeful dimming until they completely disappeared. I found myself standing without realizing it, my chair scraping against the deck. While I searched the sky for the lights, I considered whether they might be satellites, but I've seen plenty of satellite passes, and these lights hadn't moved at all. They were fixed points until they vanished. When I finally sat down again, I couldn't shake off an eerie feeling. It wasn't like someone was watching from nearby, it felt more like whatever I'd witnessed had been intentional. I tried to rationalize it as a coincidence, maybe some atmospheric effect on 2 random stars, but those perfectly synchronized flashes made that explanation feel hollow. Then the night changed. The usual cricket sounds went silent. The leaves stopped rustling. I leaned forward, straining to hear anything, but all I found was a heavy silence that made my ears ring like after leaving a loud concert. After about 5 minutes of this strange quiet, a high-pitched tone started coming from somewhere above. I checked inside the house just to be sure, but that wasn't where it was coming from. I was scrolling through my security app notifications over morning coffee when I saw it. Motion detected at 2:43 a.m. Usually it's just raccoons or the neighbor's cat, but this 15-second clip was different. The first 7 seconds looked normal enough, Grainy night vision, misty ground, dim porch light. Then everything changed. For one single frame, the yard blazed as bright as midday. The shadows cast in that split-second flash didn't match up with my porch light. The scene immediately went dark again, but that brief glimpse stayed with me. Then came the sound, a thin, unwavering tone like someone running their finger around a wine glass rim, but more precise. It held steady for about 30 seconds before stopping dead. The crickets, which had gone silent, instant till he resumed their chorus. The air felt different, sharper, crisper, like the electric feeling before a storm breaks. I gripped my cold coffee mug, suddenly aware of how the temperature had dropped. Something felt off, as if I'd stumbled into a place I shouldn't be. Before heading inside, I took one final look skyward. That's when I spotted it. A pale, perfectly straight line of light directly above where the first star had been. It wasn't bright, more like a faint thread you could only see by looking straight at it. Unlike a contrail, it didn't move or spread, just slowly faded away like the earlier lights. The whole experience lasted maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. I locked the back door that night, something I rarely do. I just sat in the living room afterward, coffee forgotten in my hands, mind blank, though I never saw those lights again. For weeks afterward, I found myself searching the night sky, not for familiar sights like planes or shooting stars, but for something else, something unnaturally still, waiting up there in the darkness. The security footage from my backyard showed something impossible. Between two normal night vision frames, there was a single frame of broad daylight. The timestamps were continuous, 24308, then 248 with no gaps, but that one bright frame was all wrong. The shadows made no sense at all. My lawn chairs cast shadows in 3 separate directions. The maple tree's shadow split in 2, reaching out from points that didn't match any normal light source. A strange, angular shadow from the fence cut diagonally across the grass. The house faces downhill, so everything should have thrown shadows the same way. But nothing lined up. I went out to check the yard around 9 a.m. Everything looked normal. Chairs where they should be, gate closed, just morning dew on the grass. The porch light was fine too. It's LED anyway. Yeah, those don't suddenly light up a whole yard like daylight. If the light had come from neighboring yards, it would have been bright enough to wake me through my blinds. But I hadn't seen or heard anything all night. When I showed the video to Eric at lunch, he's into photography. He spotted something I'd missed. Up in the left corner, just above the fence, there was this weird light smear. Not a lens flare. The edges were too defined, like something solid was reflecting light. But whatever it was, it didn't look like any object I could name. I decided to watch the yard that night. With the porch light off and blinds cracked, I sat in the living room past 2 a.m. The neighborhood was completely silent. No cars, no voices, just house noises now and then. At 2:40, something changed. The silence became heavy somehow. The highway noise disappeared. The trees went still. Even my fridge seemed muffled. I just sat there staring. I started hearing it just after 1 a.m. This deep, steady hum underneath everything else. I was dozing on the couch with the TV on when it caught my attention. Not your usual household noise like the fridge running, but something heavier, more like a bass note you feel in your chest. When I muted the TV, it was still there, pushing against the air. The sound got stronger as I walked to the front door. My street's usually dead quiet at night. Typical cul-de-sac in the suburbs. No cars, no people walking around. But this sound was different. Following it led me outside, and I ended up setting up my security camera around 2:40 a.m., hoping to catch whatever was making the noise. I watched out the window for about 10 minutes before giving up and heading to bed. The next morning's footage showed nothing unusual. Just a squirrel running past at 4 a.m. for a week straight. I checked the recordings each morning. But everything seemed to end, normal. Then I started noticing odd things during my nighttime trips outside. My shadow didn't match up with the porch light, twice. Once it stretched almost to the fence when I was barely off the steps. Taking out the trash one night, I saw what looked like a quick flash across the lawn, like a distant strobe light. It happened so fast I wasn't sure if my eyes were playing tricks on me. I rushed inside to check the live camera feed on my phone. Everything looked fine for the 15 minutes I watched, but I saved that one bright frame. I keep going back to that image, zooming in on different parts, the fence, the trees, that strange smear of light. It's weirdly sharp, clearer than the camera usually captures, like whatever lit up the yard enhanced the image quality. The shadows look wrong not just in their direction, they seem to bend in impossible ways, as if the ground beneath them warped for a split second. I've tried everything to explain it: new batteries, checking the wiring, replacing the SD card. The camera works perfectly fine and nothing like that has happened since. But every night around 2:40, I can't help looking at the clock, wondering if it might happen again. The humming caught my attention first, a strange sound that pulled me outside onto the porch. The night was unusually quiet. No crickets chirped, no wind rustled the trees, and even the usual highway noise had disappeared. In this strange stillness, only the hum remained. That's when I noticed them in the sky above the houses across the street. A cluster of lights, maybe a dozen floating about a few 100 feet up. Each light glowed a steady white with a bluish tinge, all equally bright. They weren't separate parts of one big object like I first thought. Instead, they moved together like a school of fish, instantly shifting between formations without any gradual movement. The lights dance, ed through different patterns. They'd bunch up into a tight ball, then suddenly spread apart, then snap back together. With each change in formation, the humming changed too, dropping slightly when they spread out, rising when they clustered together. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. I walked into the driveway, my eyes locked on the spectacle. The group drifted in from the west, but not in a straight line. Every few seconds they'd jump into a new arrangement, always moving as one. Their distance was impossible to judge. Sometimes they seemed close, other times far away, as if the entire formation was shifting backward and forward through the sky. I tried using the trees and houses as reference points, but nothing helped make sense of their scale. The urge to grab my phone crossed my mind, but I couldn't bear to look away. My chest tightened as I realized I'd stopped breathing. As they approached overhead, the formation suddenly stretched into a long line spanning the cul-de-sac. Then the entire line tilted sideways and shot upward toward the clouds. The humming swelled briefly before dropping off. Within seconds, the low cloud cover swallowed them completely, leaving behind absolute silence. The night sky over northern Maine can be incredibly dark and clear, especially at a cabin like my cousin's, just a small place on a lake, 20 minutes from a town so tiny it barely has a gas station. That's where I was one late September evening, trying to photograph the Milky Way. The only lights around were the stars above, my camera display, and a porch bulb I'd switched off before starting. I'd set up around 11 p.m. with my tripod, a thermos of coffee, and a folding chair. My cousin Jamie had already turned in. He had work early and wasn't interested in sitting in the cold just to watch stars. The night was absolutely still. No wind stirred, no insects chirr, no cars passed in the distance. The silence was so complete you could almost hear your own heartbeat. Only the occasional call of a loon across the lake broke the quiet. About 40 minutes into my session, something extraordinary happened. I was capturing Orion low on the horizon, halfway through a 20-second exposure, when a bright white light streaked across the sky. It wasn't blinding, but it moved in a way that defied physics, dropping diagonally for 2 seconds before making a perfect 90-degree turn left, continuing horizontally until it vanished. No curve, no arc, just an instant change in direction, like it had hit an invisible wall. The speed never changed, and it made no sound. I stood there for a good minute, staring at where the lights had disappeared. The street lights dimly illuminated the clouds above, but there was no other trace. Walking to the end of the driveway, I kept expecting them to reappear, but nothing happened. When I finally went back inside, the cable box read 1:24. Though I was sure I'd been outside less than 5 minutes, it had felt much longer. Strangely, my hands were cold, despite the mild air earlier. I checked local news the next day, hoping someone else had seen it. But there were no reports of strange lights, low-flying aircraft, or unusual weather. I haven't heard that sound since, but late at night when everything's quiet, I still find myself muting the TV, just to make sure. I was doing a night photography session when something inexplicable happened. I saw this object in the sky. My first thought was it had to be a meteor, but the way it moved, turning sharply, ruled that out. And it definitely wasn't a plane. I let the exposure complete, expecting to catch the streak in my shot. I stayed focused on the sky for a while, hoping it might return, and also to preserve my night vision. Over the next 30 minutes, I took several more photos, but nothing unusual appeared. When I finally went inside, the cabin was cozy from the wood stove. My hands felt strangely cold though, like they'd been frozen to the core. I settled in with my coffee and started reviewing the photos on my laptop. That's when things got really strange. The photo from when I'd seen the object showed absolutely nothing unusual. The stars were perfectly clear, the framing exactly right, but no streak or blur, nothing to show what I'd witnessed. The photos before and after were equally empty. I scrutinized every detail, looking for any sign of camera shake or motion blur, but found none. The timestamp matched perfectly with when I'd seen it. I ran through every possible explanation. A fast-moving object should still register somehow. Planes leave light trails. Satellites show up as streaks in long exposures. The object had been too precise, too geometric to be a hallucination. When Jamie got up and saw me fixated on the laptop, I explained what happened and showed him the pictures. He just gave me a serious frown and said weird before heading back to bed. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I checked the deck for any possible explanations. Maybe reflections from boats on the lake or distant cars. But trees completely blocked the ground view. There was no way any earthbound light source could have made that movement pattern in the sky. Though clouds prevented me from shooting that day, I set up in exactly the same spot that night. I stayed out nearly 2 hours, waiting. At about 12:30 a.m., something appeared again, but this time, it was a foggy night drive from Kevin's country house. The rain from earlier had left a thick mist hanging over the hills, forcing me to take the back road home instead of the highway. Though shorter, this route had no streetlights and barely any shoulder. I kept my spooked. Eat around 30, high beams off since they only made visibility worse in the dense fog. The car was quiet, except for my dashboard's occasional rattle over rough patches and the steady hum of tires on pavement. That's when I noticed something in the sky. A pale, grayish light drifting slowly across one spot, like a dim star. It came to a complete stop, and I watched it, thinking it might be a satellite momentarily appearing stationary. Then it shot upward briefly before disappearing. Not fading away, but vanishing instantly as if someone had flipped a switch. I checked my camera immediately, but found nothing in the frame. The stars looked normal, with no blur or bright spots. I headed inside after that, not wanting to stay outside any longer. I searched online for anything about lights over the lake, satellites, space junk, military aircraft, but nothing matched what I'd witnessed. The strangest part emerged later that week after I'd returned home. I showed the photos to my astronomy enthusiast friend without mentioning what I'd seen. He stopped at one from the first night, pointing out something odd, a small faint dot near the bottom corner. I hadn't spotted it before. When zoomed in, it wasn't round but shaped like a perfect tiny triangle. The raw file confirmed it wasn't a compression glitch, but the shape didn't appear in any other shots, and it wasn't near where I'd seen the moving light. Years have passed since that night. I've visited the cabin several times, always bringing my camera, but never saw anything similar again. Still, whenever the sky is clear, I find myself watching that same spot, wondering if it'll return. The fog was light that night, with the moon's pale disk barely visible through the haze. I was driving down a tree-lined slope when everything changed. The moonlight vanished in an instant, not gradually like a cloud passing over, but suddenly, as if something massive had positioned itself between me and the sky. What caught my attention wasn't just the darkness. The shape blocking out the moon stretched beyond the road's edges in both directions, but I couldn't make out any distinct outline. It hung there silently for maybe 5 or 6 seconds before drifting away. No sound, no wind, nothing to explain what I'd just seen. I'd unconsciously slowed to a crawl, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight. After the moonlight returned, I drove another mile or so before pulling into a gravel turnout overlooking a valley. I needed a moment to process what had happened. The usual nighttime sounds were gone, no frogs, no crickets, just complete silence. I rolled down my window, listening for any hint of engines or humming, but heard nothing. When I stepped out of my car, the fog felt wrong. Instead of the cool mist I'd expected, it was warm like a steamy bathroom, clinging to my skin and immediately dampening my jacket. The warmth seemed to come from everywhere at once, though the wet gravel under my feet wasn't its source. I stood there looking up at the sky, but the thick fog limited visibility to just a few yards. That's when I heard it, a strange sound from the trees behind me. Not quite animal, more like rustling mixed with a regular clicking. It would pause, then start again, getting closer each time. My phone's flashlight was useless against the fog, just creating a gray wall of light. I tried telling myself it was just branches moving, but there wasn't any wind. That night around 12:45 a.m., I was in bed scrolling on my phone when something caught my attention. Under the quiet hum of the kitchen fridge, there was another sound, a deep vibration so low it resonated in my chest rather than my ears. Once the fridge stopped running, the sound became more distinct, a steady hum coming from outside. The street was empty when I looked through the front window blinds. No cars, no late-night dog walkers, but that strange humming persisted. I stepped out onto the porch, where the cool air carried the scent of damp asphalt. The humming immediately grew stronger, not loud exactly, but heavy, like it had substance. Then I noticed them. Lights hovering above the houses across the street clustered together about 200 or 300 feet up. I quickly got back in my car, automatically locking the door behind me. Despite the running heater, the cabin felt damp, as if the moisture from outside had crept in with me. My breath was visible inside the car, and the windshield began fogging up even with the defroster on. I sat there with the engine idling for about 10 minutes before deciding to head home. Taking it slow, I drove while watching both the sky and the forest edges. The moon stayed visible through the fog the entire time, but that heavy feeling in the air returned whenever I passed under dense tree coverage. About 10 minutes from town, things started to normalize. The fog thinned out, the car's temperature returned to normal, and natural sounds returned: insects, frogs, even a distant dog barking. Whatever it was seemed to stay behind in the hills. At home, I went straight inside, leaving everything in the car. My clothes had a lingering damp feeling and carried this strange, earthy, metallic smell from the fog until I washed them the next day. I've driven that road at night several times since then in all sorts of weather. While nothing similar has happened again, I still find myself looking up at the sky when I pass that turnout, just to be sure. Looking up that night, I spotted an unusual formation of lights, somewhere between a dozen or more white and pale blue points. They resembled stars in size, but had a steady glow without any twinkling. What mad, then truly remarkable, was their movement pattern, unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. These lights moved as one unit, but not in any conventional way. Think of a school of fish suddenly changing direction. They'd freeze, dart sideways, then abruptly tilt in a new direction, without any transition. No gradual turns or curves, just instant directional shifts. A strange hum accompanied their movements, dropping lower when the formation spread out and rising when they clustered together. I found myself walking down my driveway, completely transfixed. Though the lights weren't particularly large, their unusual movement made them seem unnervingly close. Each shift triggered an uneasy feeling in my stomach, as if I was watching something that defied natural laws. The neighborhood had fallen eerily quiet, no highway noise from the usual few miles away, no aircraft sounds, just that persistent hum. The formation began moving toward me, gliding as if on invisible tracks. When they paused above the nearest houses, I could clearly see they weren't connected by any physical structure, just points of light floating in open space. They hovered there for about half a minute, continuously shifting and reforming. I considered getting my phone from inside, but something told me not to look away, fearing they might vanish in that moment. Suddenly, the entire group began ascending as one, seemingly pulled skyward. The hum increased in pitch but maintained its volume, creating a pressure sensation in my ears. They disappeared into a low cloud bank above the streetlights, and instantly the humming ceased, not fading out, but stopping abruptly like a switched-off machine. The silence that followed felt unnaturally complete. After staring at the clouds for what felt like ages, I finally went back inside. The clock read 1:08, though. It seemed I'd only been out for a few minutes. Yay. See, my hands were cold as if I'd been outside much longer. The next day's local news and weather reports mentioned nothing unusual, no aircraft sightings, no explanations. I noticed them about halfway into the park. 3 bright dots arranged in a perfect triangle. It was just after 9 p.m., during Jasper's last walk of the night. The pure white lights hung there, not high up like stars or planes, but closer, hovering near the far edge of the park. No blinking or flickering, just steady beams. The night had been unusually quiet. The rain from earlier left everything damp, with that earthy smell of wet leaves and soil. Though the sky threatened more rain, it was clear enough to spot stars between drifting clouds. The path lights were dimmer than usual in the small park near my apartment, where I often walked because it was typically peaceful and well lit. Jasper, my older golden retriever, had been moving at his own slow pace, but when we saw those lights, he stopped completely, frozen with stiff legs and a low tail. He didn't make a sound, just tilted his head up as if watching them too. No amount of leash tugging would move him. At first, I thought they might be drones flying in formation, but their movement was different. The 3 lights drifted as one unit, keeping their exact spacing while rotating steadily like the sky itself was turning around them. It made no sense. Helicopters would make noise, and balloons would need wind to move that precisely. There wasn't even a breeze that night. The usual sounds were gone too. No cars, no rustling trees, not even the hum from nearby traffic signals. The triangle eventually moved toward the trees at the park's edge, maintaining its perfect rotation. I checked later. There weren't any scheduled low flights, and nothing about strange lights was reported. I still can't explain how they moved. It wasn't like any aircraft or drone I've seen. That distinctive hum never returned, but sometimes in the dead of night I find myself turning off whatever I'm watching, just listening for it. The strange crunching sound woke me sometime after midnight. I couldn't check the exact time. My phone was somewhere in my pack, and I wasn't going to unzip my sleeping bag to look for it. The noise traveled through the woods in that weird, muffled way that makes it impossible to tell if something's right next to you or far away. The footsteps were too methodical to be a wild animal. No pauses for sniffing around, no random changes in direction like you'd expect from a deer or raccoon. Just slow, steady steps following a straight line. I tried telling myself it was just some forest creature, but deep down I knew better. Jasper's reaction was the weirdest part. My normally curious dog was frozen stiff, ears pulled back, his whole body tense. I'd never seen him like that before. When I tried to check on him, he wouldn't even look at me. The lights above us moved in a mesmerizing dance, warping the space around them. My neck started aching from looking up so long. The rotation gradually slowed until the lights returned to their starting position. Then everything stopped. For 5 endless seconds, they just hung there, motionless. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Then they disappeared one by one, not fading away, just blinking out of existence. As soon as the last light vanished, the neighborhood sounds rushed back. Cars in the distance, a barking dog, humming streetlights. Jasper suddenly relaxed and started walking like nothing had happened. I kept looking up at the empty sky as we headed home, half expecting the lights to return. Later in my apartment, I searched for any explanation. Local events, air shows, weather phenomena. Nothing turned up. I hadn't even thought to take a pee. Though my phone was right there in my pocket. For days afterward, Jasper would avoid that spot in the park, giving it a wide berth like something dangerous lurked there. He went back to normal after about a week, but I still won't walk through that park at night. Some things just stick with you. I was alone in my tent when the night turned strange. The first sign was a crunching sound, like boots on gravel. But this was deep in the woods, a quarter mile from the main trail, in a small clearing I'd found earlier that day. The only gravel around was the ring of pale stones marking the clearing's edge. The sound grew closer until it reached the clearing's border. That's when I noticed something wasn't right. The night had turned unnaturally quiet. No crickets chirping, no wind rustling leaves, just dead silence except for that crunching. Then I saw it, a faint white glow, dim like a dying flashlight. But this wasn't someone with a lantern. The light moved oddly, weaving through the trees about 30 feet away. It didn't swing or sway like a normal light source would. Instead, it slid sideways close to the ground, as if following an invisible track, circling the clearing's edge. My instincts told me to stay still, but my hand found the tent zipper anyway. If someone was playing tricks, I needed to know. I pulled it down as slowly as possible, though. Even that tiny metal sound seemed too loud in the silence. By the time I got my head out, the glow had vanished. I stayed frozen, staring into the darkness. The clearing looked normal, just trees, shadows, and cold night air. But something felt wrong. The woods remained silent, stripped of their usual nighttime sounds. After half an hour of tense waiting, I finally grabbed my flashlight. Its beam revealed everything exactly as I'd left it. The stone ring, fire pit, and low grass undisturbed. When I checked the SPO, where I'd seen the light, there were no footprints. No signs that anything had been there at all. Just empty woods and shadows, leaving me with questions I couldn't answer. It was past midnight when I was driving back from Green Hollow, one of those tiny towns that barely makes it onto maps. County Road 6 stretched ahead, just narrow asphalt between thick tree lines, broken by the occasional field. You could drive for 10 minutes out there without seeing another car. I had an AM station playing quietly, fading in and out. That's when I spotted on my right, a bright yellowish light hanging in the darkness. My first thought was a street lamp, but that made no sense. There were no houses nearby, no poles along the road, nothing that would need lighting. Without really thinking about it, I pulled onto the gravel shoulder. The light hovered about 200 yards from the road over an open patch of land. It hung perfectly still, as if suspended by invisible wire. Too high for a tractor light, too low to be a star. I turned off my engine and rolled down the window. The only sounds were crickets and rustling grass. After about a minute, it moved. The motion wasn't up or down, not in an arc. Just a smooth, level glide sideways, like someone had taken the whole scene and slid it along a track. There was something deeply unsettling about how it moved. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt wrong. It was unnaturally steady, like gravity didn't apply to it. I watched as it drifted toward a low hill in the distance. The gravel ring around my campsite was untouched, but the grass looked disturbed. When I turned back to my tent, I froze. My backpack, which I'd left under the vestibule, was now sitting upright in the middle of the clearing. I hadn't moved it since going to bed. I checked it carefully. The straps were still buckled, zippers closed. Inside, everything to boot, as exactly as I'd left it. Food, clothes, phone, nothing missing, nothing added. It had just been moved. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat in the tent, Flashlight in my lap, waiting for dawn. In the morning light, the clearing looked normal. No footprints in the dirt, the gravel ring undisturbed. The only evidence anything had happened was my backpack, still sitting where I'd found it in the night. I packed up quickly, cutting my trip short. When I reached the trail, I didn't look back. That night drive changed everything I thought I knew about ordinary lights in the dark. It started when I left my friend's place at 12:45, expecting the usual 30-minute trip home. The road was empty in both directions, a familiar stretch I'd driven many times before. Then I saw it, a warm, steady glow moving sideways across a field. Not like any normal light source. It kept its constant brightness as it traveled, until it disappeared behind a small hill. The strange thing was, that area had no utility poles, no wires, nothing that could explain what I was watching. I chilled my headlights and waited. The light never came out the other side of the hill. In the darkness, my eyes kept catching what seemed like faint movements beyond the rise, but nothing I could be sure about. When I finally started my car again, I noticed something else wasn't right. My radio had gone dead. Every station was static or silence, including the AM channel I'd been listening to earlier. About 5 minutes later, I spotted another light ahead. This one turned out to be just a farmhouse porch light in the distance, fixed and normal. Finding something so ordinary actually came as a relief, making the earlier experience feel even more unsettling by comparison. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the car clock read 1:42. That didn't add up. Even with my brief stop, I should have been home by 1:15. I tried to convince myself I'd lost track of time, maybe sat there for 20 minutes instead of 5. But I knew I hadn't been tired enough to lose that much time. Back home, the kitchen radio worked perfectly fine. Clear stations, music, everything normal. I thought about calling someone, but how do you explain seeing a floating light slide into a hill without sounding crazy? The next day, I went back in daylight. The field was just an ordinary patch of grass. The hill rose maybe 10 feet, with more sloping land and woods behind it. No structures, no tire tracks, nothing that could have created what I saw. The light caught my attention first, a steady, pale wash across the wall. Not the usual streetlight or my neighbor's porch, but something different. It moved like someone had pressed a flashlight against my curtains and walked away. My phone showed 2:17 a.m. when I sat up in bed. I'm Aaron, living in this narrow lot house where the edge of town meets a strip of scrub and a small fishing river. Most nights here are quiet. This night was different. Everything familiar was in place. My shoes by the door, coffee tin in the kitchen, the hallway fan on its timer. But the radio stayed silent. No mechanical sounds ticked through the house. Through the curtains, the light pulsed like a heartbeat visible through thin fabric. The moon crossed my mind, but I knew better. It was somewhere else in the sky tonight, and moons don't blink. I pulled on some pants and a sweatshirt, leaving my feet bare, and headed to the back door. Outside, the air carried the scent of rain, despite the clear forecast. Cool! Grass met my feet as I walked out. The light hung there, right above the tree line by the river, filling the yard and blocking out any stars in that section of sky. It was an unsettling shade of white, neither warm nor cold, like a dimmed photo flash stuck in slow motion. The scene felt wrong in subtle ways. The air remained still within the light's reach. Trees kept their usual sway. My neighbor's dog stayed quiet. Then something near the river, maybe an owl, maybe a raccoon, called out and went silent, as if someone had hit mute on the world. From my spot on the patio, I watched it pulse 3 times. I ran through every logical explanation. Construction lights, a generator across the river, police helicopters. Nothing fit. Looking at the neighboring houses, every window was dark. No search beams cut through the night, no reflections bounced off the trees. The light wasn't close enough to smell, but it felt too near for comfort. When reality stops making sense, all the little details start to weigh heavy. Next morning, checking the same spot in daylight, I found only empty space. Over the past few days, I'd noticed small things going wrong with electronics. Nothing major, just odd little glitches. The motion sensor on my garage stopped working 2 nights ago, not turning on any lights when I came home. My truck's clock was off by 3 minutes this morning, which I'd blamed on the recent battery change. A post popped up on our neighborhood Facebook group about a strange humming sound on the south side around 11 p.m. Standing there that night, all these separate incidents suddenly connected in my mind. The electrical hiccups, the weird noises, everything. I wanted to call someone but stopped myself, my voice sounding strangely thin in the darkness. Who would I even contact about a mysterious light over my backyard? The thought of calling the non-emergency police line made me feel foolish. Common sense told me to go back inside, lock up, and wait for daylight. But something pulled me toward that pool of light. The world felt different as I stepped off the patio, my bare feet sinking into wet grass. The yard seemed bigger somehow, its edges stretching further than normal. The light changed, not dimming exactly, but its center grew narrower, like it was focusing. I kept walking without meaning to, until something made me stop, maybe just a shift in how sound traveled through the air. Then, it happened. The light blinked twice, faster than before, and vanished completely. No fading, no movement. Just there 1 second and gone the next, like covering a flashlight with your hand. The stars came back into view. The trees turned back into dark shapes against the sky. Regular nighttime sounds slowly returned to the neighborhood. Air conditioners humming, the fan in my hallway. Animals started making noise again, cautiously at first, then normally. My neighbor's dog woke up and started barking at something in the street. I stood there watching the empty space where the light had been, hoping it might come back. When I checked my phone, it read 2:24 a.m. Somehow I'd lost 7 minutes. When you're sure you've been awake the whole time, missing minutes feel like falling. The porch camera, an old doorbell cam I'd installed because of package theft, was dead. Its LED completely dark. Last night, something happened in my backyard that I can't explain. When I checked my doorbell camera this morning, what I found only deepened the mystery. The camera was working. The ring around it blinked when I opened the app, but the recorded clip was corrupted. Just a 1-second file showing a single white frame, then nothing. All the other clips played fine. I searched everywhere for evidence. The yard, fence line, riverbank path, tree trunks. The grass felt normal where I'd walked. No scorch marks, no footprints. The air smelled like regular yard air, no trace of ozone or metallic taste. My hands were trembling, and it wasn't from the cold. Back inside, I locked up and sat at the kitchen table in the dark watch. Hing through a crack in the blinds. Nothing returned. Around 3:10 a.m., I went to bed, but sleep was difficult. Every little noise felt weighted, like someone might be just out of view. The next morning, I talked to my neighbor Casey while watering our lawns. He laughed at first, but his expression changed when I described the timing and the camera glitch. "Weird," he said. "My dad mentioned seeing a bright light over the river from his porch. Thought it was a drone." Casey checked his security system. There was a 2-minute gap in the recording around 2:17 a.m. He remembered hearing something muffled but fell back asleep. By noon, I had 3 unexplainable things. My corrupted doorbell camera file, Casey's missing footage, and 7 missing minutes on my phone's clock. Not proof of anything specific, just evidence that something strange had occurred. I tried to have a normal day, answered work emails, picked up dry cleaning, had dinner with a friend who wanted to discuss politics instead of mysterious lights. But my thoughts kept returning to the yard, especially how that light had focused to a point before vanishing. At dusk, I walked down to the riverbank where you can see all the backyards in a line. The far bank showed no burn marks, just another normal evening, except for what we'd lost in those few minutes overnight. I live at the edge of town, in a split-level house at the end of a cul-de-sac, just a yard away from the marsh. The nights here are usually quiet, just frogs and distant highway trucks. I'm Ben, and what I'm about to tell you happened on what seemed like any other night. Earlier that day, the kitchen clock had stopped at 1:47. My old radio had been acting strange all week, cutting to static during serious segments of talk shows, then clearing up again. Just little, ordinary things I hadn't connected, until that night when I woke up at 2:11 a.m. The curtains were too bright, but not from any normal source. This wasn't a street lamp's glow or headlights. A pale light filled my bedroom, washing into every corner without casting harsh shadows, like someone had hung a sheet and shone a flashlight directly at it. I ran through the usual explanations: a neighbor's porch light, a delivery truck, car high beams, but none of them matched what I was seeing. I pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, then walked barefoot to the back door. Outside, the air carried the green, wet smell of the marsh after rain, though the forecast had been clear. The light hovered directly above the tall cedar at the yard's edge, close enough to erase the stars in that part of the sky, making them look flat, making the trees look like paper cutouts. There was no sound, no hum, no motor, nothing. The water in the marsh kept flowing normally. Fireflies drifted around, looking like disconnected stars. I still can't explain what happened. I have some evidence, camera footage, my neighbor's account, but no real answers. Just a strange gap in time that sits in my memory like something foreign in my pocket. When I tell people, they ask if I'm okay, offer coffee, and move on to other topics. They want me to laugh it off, make it normal again. Sometimes I do. Other times, I stand at my back door watching the sky, waiting. If whatever it was comes back, I want to see how ordinary everything looks when it appears. The moment began with a wash, more feeling than sound. I stood in the doorway, gripping the frame with both hands on the concrete step. The smoke detector chirped insistently from the hallway. Just a low battery, I reasoned. Mrs. Lopez's dog barked 2 houses over. A surprise sound that cut off abruptly like a switch had been flipped. The decision wasn't about what it could be, but what I should do. Going outside wasn't brave. It was simply the choice that kept me in the light. Other options felt wrong. Calling 911, driving to town, or pretending to sleep inside. So I stepped onto the dew-covered lawn, the grass cold against my bare feet. The light had a rhythm, a slow, steady pulse like someone checking their phone in your peripheral vision. Not a harsh strobe, but a gentle on-off breathing pattern. Walking toward it, my old analog watch seemed to hesitate between ticks. I remember how oddly precise the pulse felt, and how strange that thought seemed even then. In the yard's center, the cedar cast its shadow across my boots. The light focused briefly, like through a lens, before spreading again. Another step forward, and the pulse quickened, subtle but definite. Then it vanished completely, replaced by a starlit sky. No gradual fade, just gone. Normal sounds returned, highway noise, an owl calling a neighbor's screen door. My watch showed 2:17. Later, my phone on the kitchen counter read 2:19. Something about those missing minutes felt wrong, as if time had shifted while I wasn't watching. Back in the kitchen's bright light, I tried to act normal. The orange I peeled came off in one perfect strip as I listened to the house settle. The living room radio played only static, regardless of the station. The doorbell camera's live feed showed just the sidewalk and marsh path in moonlight. Late that night, I discovered something strange in the security footage. An unbroken recording from 1 to 209, then a single white frame at 210, followed by emptiness until normal footage picked up again at 220. That white frame haunted me, no shape or detail, just pure brightness, like the camera had been overwhelmed by light. I did what anyone would do when faced with something they can't explain. I called my brother. He was groggy and irritated when he answered, brushing it off as probably just a police helicopter. But his dismissive tone changed when I described how the light had pulsed and disappeared when I went outside. His wife joined the conversation, asking practical questions about locks and cameras. The incident felt both more and less real depending on who was talking about it. That night was restless. I kept checking windows and doors, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The house seemed alive with noise, creaking pipes, the furnace, the wind, whenever I dozed off. By morning, I was outside with a flashlight, searching the yard. The grass showed nothing unusual, no burns, no strange smells, just my own footprints in the dew. The neighbors had their own stories. Mrs. Lopez mentioned hearing an odd whistle around 2 in the morning, assuming it was a train. A couple walking their terrier had been watching meteors and saw a bright flash above the cedar tree. Their accounts almost made sense, but didn't quite line up with what I'd experienced. None of it fully explained what had happened. The missing footage, the dead radio, the moment when every living thing seemed to freeze. But life demanded normalcy. So I tried to focus on ordinary things, responding to work emails and dealing with that twice-postponed dentist appointment. The flight to Farmington should have been routine. I'd done it countless times before. Clear skies, barely a moon, autopilot humming along at 5550Z. Just me, a cooling thermos of coffee, and scattered radio chatter from distant cargo trucks. The kind of night that reminds you how small everything really is. I avoided the backyard until evening came, treating that strange spot with an unspoken reverence. The creek frogs had started their nightly chorus when I finally stood at the kitchen window, staring at the cedar tree. Tom from the hardware store had stopped by earlier, offering that hollow comfort. Don't let it get to you, because what else could he say? The night felt both normal and not. Sharp pinprick stars overhead, everything exactly where it should be. Yet I kept thinking about that white frame on the camera, how time had seemed to fold in on itself, how the light had vanished the moment I crossed its boundary. Maybe a dozen people could witness the same thing and walk away with different stories or no story at all. I tried sleeping in my own bed, curtains drawn tight. The house made its usual sounds, pipes settling, fan whirring, refrigerator humming, but everything carried a hint of marsh after rainfall. When the curtains rustled around 1 a.m., my heart jumped until I spotted my cat on the windowsill, watching something outside. I left it undisturbed, just listening to the ordinary strangeness of the night. I have no proper name for what I saw, no reliable photo, no authority to validate it. Just the memory of that pale, steady light, its slow pulse, and the empty white file on my camera, the knowledge that some quiet things cease to exist the moment you step into them. I go through the motions, sleeping, working, making coffee. But my mind keeps circling back, trying to grasp something that won't be held, like water slipping through fingers. A dark shape held position at my altitude, about 5 or 6 miles to the left, aligned with the wingtip. I'd almost missed it. My first thought was it was a star, but no star could be this close. The sharp edge against the night sky caught no light, had no familiar aircraft markers, no nav lights flashing red or green, no white strobes. My first instinct was it must be unexpected traffic, maybe an unlit crop duster or banner tow. I ran through the usual checks, hit the transponder, switched to ident, listened for TCAST alerts. Nothing showed up. The traffic displays were empty, though my equipment was working. Staying fine, I could see other aircraft we'd heard earlier on the ADS-B. Still, this thing moved like it belonged in our airspace, maintaining its position beside us. I radioed center. Cessna 7KQH visual traffic left 2 o'clock, same altitude. Say intentions. The controller's response came back clear and professional. 7KH center. Roger. We show no primary or secondary target in your area. Maintain present heading and altitude. No target. Copy, I replied. After checking my instruments, the HSI heading the GPS track, I looked back out. The object had perfectly matched our ground track and speed, but not in the normal way two planes might fly together. It stuck to our velocity vector like it was locked in place. I took manual control, banking left 3 degrees for a better view. That's when it did something impossible. Instead of banking, it rolled sideways, defying normal flight physics. It moved like a model in water, sliding laterally opposite my bank with strange grace. No exhaust, no wake, just fluid motion, like a dancer improvising new steps. Center 7KH, I called again, keeping my voice level. Right now, the traffic's holding exactly parallel. It's rolling away to the west. Static filled the pause. The first sign was a familiar noise in my headset, that precise sound radios make when something's off. I did what any pilot would do, switched to ground, checked the squelch, tried the standby, and moved through the audio panel. Everything came up clean. All the normal systems were doing their normal things. The PTO heat was on, vacuum held steady, alternator showed green. Even when the clock blinked and came back, it was just another item on a list of ordinary equipment doing what it should. I grabbed my binoculars from under the glare shield and felt a strange coldness on them, like they'd been stored somewhere frigid. Through them, I could make out something unusual. Geometric shape, nothing like regular aircraft with their rounded bellies. The edges were completely matte, swallowing my landing light instead of bouncing it back. No windows, no tail, no blur from propellers. The silhouette was sharp, but nothing flickered or shimmered like it should have at that distance. The object matched our movement perfectly until I tried for a head-on view. I banked right, carefully adjusting the throttles to maintain speed, hoping to avoid any manual altitude adjustments. But it didn't follow in a normal chase pattern. Instead, it moved like it was being pulled away on an invisible string, completing a lazy roll before drifting. That's the best word I have for it. Sideways across the horizon. No noise, no heat trail, like watching smoke gather instead of disperse. I called approach on the guard channel, identifying myself and reporting traffic at my 1 o'clock, matching my altitude. They responded quickly when asked about aircraft in the OMA sector. 7KQH negative, they said. We've got your transponder and known traffic, but nothing else. Can you show me primary? I asked. Can you actually see anything on radar where I'm looking? The controller's tone told me they were checking their scope for primary returns. Negative 7KQH. No targets. Are you getting any interference? Negative on interference, I replied. The night flight to Farmington started normally until that shape appeared in the dark sky. I watched it for 2 minutes, trying to make sense of what began as an odd puzzle and ended in complete disappearance. The silhouette changed. It got narrower, brighter, like light bending through a lens. I thought it would do something normal, maybe ignite or strobe or show some exhaust. But no, it just shrank to a point and vanished. No physical process I could explain. It was there one moment. That indigo shape inst the night sky and gone the next. No streaking away, no movement across the stars. Just empty space where it had been. After it disappeared, small, strange things started happening in the cockpit. My pilot's watch jumped ahead 5 minutes before fixing itself. The thermos moved on its own. I'd been recording on my phone, but the files were ruined. One became an unopenable mess. The other showed just 3 frames of a dark smear before turning into what my phone called unsupported blackness. The controller asked if I wanted to divert when I reported it, but that made no sense. Where would I go? We kept flying to Farmington, like nothing unusual had happened. I kept my hands floating above the controls during landing, somehow feeling safer not touching them. Everything worked perfectly. The wind stayed steady, the runway appeared right where it should, and the instruments guided us down just like they're supposed to. But something felt off. The cabin had this weird electric coolness I couldn't explain, so I left the lights on while taxiing. At the FBO, between dealing with customers, I tried getting someone to check the files. Maintenance looked over everything: transponder data, ATC records, GPS logs. They only found one tiny blip in the GPS track showing a split-second speed change. The radar tape from the controller showed nothing where we'd been. One of them just said this happens sometimes at night, like that was any kind of explanation. I wasn't really expecting answers or a formal report. The controller had said we would when I asked about marking it for engineers, but nothing came of it. We had no real evidence, just position and distance estimates, which pilots aren't great at judging at night. I guessed it was 2-3 miles to our left at our altitude. I was grilling one summer evening, turning a beer in my hand when everything changed. The backyard was peaceful. Sprinklers off, kids inside. That's when I spotted it over the maple tree. A bright point hovering low above my neighbor's garage. At first glance, it seemed like a plane, but this was different. It moved with an unnatural grace, floating down like someone controlling a paper lantern. Then it just stopped, hanging there above the western horizon. The light wasn't like anything I'd seen before. Not a flare, not a street light. It had this intense star-like quality that cast an impossible shadow from the maple onto my lawn. The shadow made no sense in the dim evening light. The whole neighborhood felt different. Our dog Gus, who's usually fearless in storms, just sat there on the back step, head cocked like he was listening to something. The crickets went quiet. A TV's dialogue drifted from somewhere down the street, jarring in the strange silence. The porch light flickered on and off twice by itself. Everything felt frozen, like the world was holding its breath. I went home that morning and wrote up the standard incident report. When I told my wife about it later, I left out parts that might have sounded crazy. The empty patch of sky still haunts me. People try to explain it away. Weather balloon, drone, optical illusion. But none of those explanations fit what I saw or didn't see. I still do night flights. It's my job, has been for years. But I'm more careful now. I double-check everything. Transponder, squitter, frequency, wing flex, even my thermos. And when I'm flying to Farmington and notice something dark where a star should be, I report it faster than I used to. The controller always says there's nothing there, but I know what I saw. I stood there watching when I called out Lena's name, keeping my voice quiet. After all, a falling star wasn't exactly emergency material. She joined me on the porch in her slippers, and we shared a wordless minute-taking in the sight. The light just stayed there, defying physics, neither blinking nor moving. I tried capturing it on my phone, but technology wasn't cooperating. The face unlock dragged, and when I finally got the camera open, the image was nothing like reality. Just a blurry mess where the trees melted into shadows and the light became an overexposed blob. Switching to video didn't help. My phone grew unusually hot, struggling to process what it was seeing. The playback was even worse, choppy footage that ended in darkness. Things got stranger. My cheap digital watch couldn't decide what time it was, jumping between 9:07, 9:21, and 9:08. Lena saw it too and let out a nervous laugh, trying to brush off the creeping oddness. The audio recording caught everything normal. Her socks on the wood, the neighbor's humming fridge, but completely failed to properly capture that light. Then it moved. Not down or away, but straight up like it was yanked by an invisible string. The acceleration was dizzying. One moment it hung below the roofline, the next it was shooting skyward. For a split second, it looked like something from a children's book about comets, complete with a tail that vanished as quickly as it appeared. All that remained was a tiny point of light, racing upward until it disappeared entirely. Everything happened so fast that both Lena and I stumbled over our words, asking half-formed questions. Around us, neighbors were peering through their windows. Gus jumped up, scanning the empty sky as if expecting an encore. The maple tree shadow had returned to normal, just a gentle silhouette cast by moonlight, while a truck's radio played somewhere down the street. The night started normally enough until that strange light appeared. When we went back inside later, Gus wouldn't move past the kitchen door, a sign that something had unsettled. Deemed too, the backyard usually holds simple answers. Neighbors, radio towers, satellites, prank devices. I went through each possibility in my head, dismissing them one by one. No drones fly over our neighborhood at 9:30 on a Tuesday. Our scanner hadn't picked up any emergency calls. The airport's in a different direction entirely, and satellites don't suddenly dive toward the horizon before shooting straight up. Yet something had moved with precise, deliberate purpose where nothing should have been able to. The oddities piled up quickly. When Lena and I returned outside just 5 minutes after I'd shut off the sprinkler at 8, it was running again, despite its timer being set to off. The patch of lawn where the light had hung felt eerily cold under my bare foot, like touching stone that had been chilled by ice. I checked the grass carefully, but found no burn marks or singed stems, just damp, cool soil mixed with the smell of earth and our grill's metallic scent. We searched the area with our phone flashlights, calling out to our neighbors Jonah and Mira. Jonah appeared over the fence in his robe and sneakers, suggesting it might have been an airplane or a drone or hell, a light on a fishing pole, though he seemed embarrassed by his own theories. Mira stayed inside, more concerned about the late hour than the sky, waving from her window before her cat slipped away through its door, eyes gleaming like coins. The TV had gone to static for a few seconds, as if listening to something, before cutting out completely. Later, we sat on the porch steps, staring at our blank phone screens as if they might reveal something we'd missed. Lena suggested it could have been a meteor. I mentioned last month's visible comet. That's how the mind works, trying to match patterns it recognizes. I kept thinking about that maple tree's impossible shadow, and how strangely peaceful everything else had remained. After that brief flash of light, the sky returned to normal, stars in their usual places, a thin haze above the western trees, and the moon hanging there like a dried-out coin. The radio crackled into static as my car slid under the mist. It wasn't normal highway fog. This stuff had its own glow, lighting up from within. The guardrail's wet paint gleamed like a slice of moon through that strange cotton blanket haze hanging over the fields. I kept checking the western sky at twilight, looking for that star-like point that would drift down and shoot straight up, as if pulled by an invisible string. The memory felt like a footnote to an ordinary night, the distant traffic, a barking dog, headlights turning away from our house. It didn't make me scared for our safety. Instead, I felt small and observed, like when a stranger's knowing look in the grocery store catches something you didn't mean to reveal. The video on my phone showed it all wrong. After the bright flash, the screen went blue before settling on an unfamiliar face. I watched it repeatedly until my battery dropped from 90% to 80%, my thumb hovering uncertainly over delete. I couldn't explain it properly to Lena. All I could say was that it moved wrong, which was the only truthful way to describe it. By morning, everything looked normal. Jonah hammered away in his garage. The sprinklers ran on schedule, and the maple tree stood unchanged. Our dog, Gus, who'd watched it all with forward-tilted ears and dreamlike blinks, now just wanted his breakfast. I kept my story simple when I told it. Just the time, the camera glitch, the cold spot in the grass. No hints of anything otherworldly. Lena moved through it all deliberately, rinsing dishes, turning off taps, as if careful movements could restore order. When I locked the back door that night, it felt like an attempt to hold the darkness still. She said maybe it was nothing, like a blessing, and I wanted to believe her. But I couldn't shake what I'd seen. The static filled every station as I thumbed the radio dial. My cheap car often lost reception between towers, but this was different. The whole world felt muted, like someone had pressed a dampening button at its edges. I just tapped the steering wheel, matching the beat of the white noise. I was driving way too late, having spent an extra hour organizing cabinets at the shop. I'd promised myself I'd be home in time for Sunday breakfast. The highway stretched empty before me, with only a soft blue diner sign and an idling truck at the last exit I'd passed. The mist hung low like a ceiling, shrinking everything beneath it into a shoebox world. Strange things started happening. Small things that wouldn't matter except they weren't supposed to be. The mileposts jumped oddly. 34, then 38, then 43. The dashboard clock flashed 207, paused, then showed 207 again. A pickup truck ahead of me simply vanished, its tail lights disappearing like someone switching off Christmas decorations. Under the static came a constant, muted sound, a thin, low hum that could have been the car or the air itself. My ears plugged, then popped as I tried to blink my vision clear. The mist carried a metallic scent mixed with that after-storm puddle smell, though it hadn't rained. The strange air moved through the cabin, leaving the upholstery unnaturally scentless, as if it had been cleaned. Where the road's painted lines met the fog, the colors seemed to melt into the air. I should have felt scared, but instead found myself wrapped in that strange animal calm. I knew I should turn back toward the interstate's lights, but the fog held me with its peculiar softness, making the idea of turning around feel wrong. So I drove slower, one hand on the wheel, the other touching the spot where my morning coffee had left its warmth. The first thing that struck me was the time. My cheap high school watch showed 2:14. The car's digital display read 21:42, like some strange agreement had formed in the dashboard. 7 minutes had vanished, and I couldn't explain where they went. I was driving on an empty road, no cars for miles around. The landscape was dark except for two gentle lights, a diner sign and a distant farmhouse lamp illuminating a neat square of yard. When I emerged from whatever that was, the radio suddenly cut from static to a country station. A woman discussed the weather like everything was normal. The sudden switch from hiss to voice made my skin crawl. You have to maintain the routine when strange things happen. Keep steering. Keep the wheel straight. Watch your speed. My hands felt unusually tight on the wheel, and I couldn't remember what song had been playing before. I tried piecing together the fragments, the town line sign, the diner, some mist, a glow, then static, but nothing explained the missing time. There were no signs of anything unusual. No brake marks, no turns, no phone distractions. My gloved hands felt sticky, but the air was clean and ordinary. I'd seen odd things before. A porch light that burned for a week straight, the store's digital sign repeating the same text for hours. But those were just small-town quirks. This felt different. My jaw felt heavy, and I tasted stale coffee in that metallic tang. My phone showed nothing unusual. No missed calls, no notifications, no time jumps. The GPS showed I'd stayed on course. I drove home with the windows slightly open, letting in the harsh, real cold. At a stoplight near my house, a kid rode past on his bike, singing with his headphones on. When his watch matched mine, the reality of the time slip hit me hard. I wanted to stop everyone and ask if they'd hit something too, but instead, I just drove home. I focused on the familiar motions, turning the key, pulling the handbrake, opening the door. Sometimes those ordinary actions are all that keep you grounded. The frost on the lawn that morning sparkled like watered glass under the pale, disinterested early sun. I let myself feel the cold in the doorway until my nose went numb, going through my usual checks. The car seemed perfectly normal. Oil level right, tires firm, no fresh scratches anywhere. My coffee cup stood undisturbed in its holder, and the radio remembered its station like it always did. There were some dark specks on the driver's floor mat, but they could have been old. I made coffee with deliberate slowness, listening to the kettle's familiar note. Those 7 missing minutes set in my mind like a blank space in a film reel. Edges clear, but nothing in between. I could sense the mist, the static, the smell around that void, but the center remained empty. Someone had cut out a strip of film, and now we were all pretending not to notice the jump in the story. Since then, I've driven that same road in daylight, doing what people always do after something strange, searching for signs, for proof, for reasons. Everything looks unchanged. The farm lights, the diner with its yellowed menu and sweeping man, the mile markers in their proper places. My watch glass shows only the scratch from last month's toolbox incident. The radio plays normally, with static only where reception fails. I never told anyone, didn't call the shop or text my sister. What would I say about 7 lost minutes and a mysterious glow? Now, driving home at night, I sometimes see patches of the neighbor's field that seem lit from below, with that same soft, impossible light. I blink, and it's just ordinary lawn and fence again. Maybe I dozed off. Maybe it was just some truck's headlights in my mirror. Maybe there's a simpler explanation blown up by coincidence. But sometimes I'm left with just the memory. The hiss, the hum, the strange quiet under that ceiling of something, and my clock showing the exact same minute twice. I don't have a neat ending to wrap this up with. I just have what happened. The lights appeared before any other sign that something was wrong. A delicate string of pale dots wove through the trees ahead of the switchback like tiny lanterns on an invisible thread being softly shaken. They moved silently, dipping under branches and rising again, tracing what could have been a walking path through the forest. My first thought was hikers with LED markers or phones, but then reality hit. I was completely alone on the ridge that night. Earlier, I'd been hiking with Maya and Tom, but they'd gone ahead when we reached the rocky slope leading to the creek. My sore knee had slowed me down, and we'd planned to regroup at the switchback for a meal break. The full moon cast enough light to throw shadows, so my headlamp stayed around my neck, unused. Just my pack's red. LED blinked softly near the zipper. The forest air carried the scent of wet earth and pine, and my breath came out in cold, stinging puffs. When I first spotted the lights, I froze instinctively, the way you do when deer appear on a road, your body reacting before your mind catches up. These weren't ordinary lights. They moved with an organic quality, clustered in strange patterns, 3 together, then a single hovering light, followed by 4 spinning ones. Their glow was warm and gentle, like candlelight behind glass, nothing like harsh LED beams. They didn't cast reflections on the wet pine needles or shiny bark, and sometimes they passed through tree trunks, emerging slightly offset as if the solid wood meant nothing to them. I tried to ratio, Nalazet, swamp gas, will-o'-the-wisps, those old explanations that seem silly until you need them. By the time I reached the small, flat section of trail, these strange sun-like dots were moving ahead of me. 7 minutes of my night are missing now, sitting in my memory like a held breath. After that, life went on with its simple routines. Getting home, making coffee, going to sleep. The lights moved ahead of me on the trail, drawing me forward with a peculiar mix of wariness and intrigue. My feet made soft sounds on the packed earth, but the night absorbed every noise, buckles clicking, fabric rustling. Each time I got close, they'd slip away, teasing me with their dance. My blood pounded in my throat, a private drumbeat that felt oddly loud. The forest had gone quiet in a way I recognized, like when a hawk passes overhead and every bird falls silent. The crickets had stopped their song, and I couldn't hear Maya's laughter or Tom's footsteps anymore. The darkness felt different too, not the usual rich, full dark of the woods, but something thinner, closer. The weight of my unused headlamp pressed against my chest. Words formed in my mind, "Maya, Tom, you there?" But I kept them locked away. Making noise felt too permanent, too revealing. Still, I couldn't stop moving forward. That's how curiosity works on me. It pulls like gravity, even when everything else screams to turn back. Then the lights moved. It wasn't like they were attached to anything solid. They shifted like living things, understanding my movements the way animals do. They shot upward through the trees, flowing like sparrows in flight, twisting and climbing until they froze about 50 feet above the trail. Some clustered tight, like stars gathered in a child's fist. Others spread out, scattered like musical notes. They hung there, completely still. No flickering, no drifting down, no move, meant at all. Moonlight filtered through them, turning the pine bark silver. The lights themselves glowed honey-warm, neither burning bright nor reflecting anything around them. I realized I'd been holding my breath when it came out in a white cloud. My hand found my phone. It was cold to the touch. The screen lit up. 11:42, no messages. The lights disappeared like someone unscrewing bulbs one after another. Not sudden, more like sleepy eyes closing. Each time one went dark, the quiet in the air got heavier. I kept staring at the ordinary moon and stars above, which only made those strange things hanging between the tree branches look even more out of place. Everything had started with my compass app acting weird, pointing north in the wrong direction. My watch was off too, the second hand shaking. Little things, really. The kind you only notice when your brain is scrambling to make sense of something much bigger. I didn't even bother using my phone after that. One by one, the lights faded until there was nothing left except moonlight, silence, and the sound of me breathing. It ended so simply that I felt annoyed more than scared. Funny how being annoyed can feel safer than being afraid. I called out, "Hey," but my echo came back weaker than it went out. My legs went numb from standing still so long. I wanted to turn on my headlamp and head back to camp, maybe call Maya or Tom, but I couldn't move my hands. I told myself whatever it was had gone away. Not really an explanation, but good enough to let me move again. When I walked to where the lights had been, I kicked around in the pine needles. Nothing there, no burn marks, no traces, just wet leaves and one angry beetle running away. I found Maya and Tom at the creek clearing, sitting on a fallen log with their headlamps off, looking worried. Maya told me she'd been by the water when I slowed down and I'd turned back. Tom had his map out. They hadn't seen anything strange. When I asked about the lights, Tom suggested fireflies, with that shrug people give when they're trying to keep things normal. It would have been easier if they'd seen it too. Weird things feel less weird when you share them. But they hadn't. So we just walked back to camp in a quiet line. The lake stretched out like a mirror that night, peaceful, under clear stars. I was settled in for the long haul, 3 hours into my overnight fishing shift with just cold coffee and a cheap headlamp for company. The simplicity felt right. Just me, following the rhythm of casting and reeling, not needing to think beyond the next throw of the line. Small changes crept in slowly. My old college watch stumbled a beat before catching itself. A cabin light across the inlet went dark longer than it should have, as if someone had covered it. The marsh frogs, usually so vocal, went quiet in stages until their song disappeared completely. That silence made every little noise in the boat sound huge, the oar scraping, the lure clicking as I pulled it in. The bobber teased me with gentle dips before straightening up like nothing had touched it. When I set the hook, pure reflex really, the line came back exactly as it had gone out. A heron glided in on slow wings, landing on a distant piling, its neck perfectly still as it waited. I watched its shape against the stars, not knowing then how much that ordinary night would stick with me. Later, at home under my kitchen light, I cleaned my boots and kept thinking about those lights in the trees. I tried every normal explanation, reflections, pranksters, weird weather, but none felt true. There was nothing to prove what we'd seen. No photos, no scorched bark, nothing. The trail had been completely normal that night. The same routes, the same rocks, even that spot where I'd once slipped and scraped my palm. The memory became like a face glimpsed in a crowd. The more you tried to focus on it, the more the details slipped away. I made coffee, listening to the kettle's quiet clicks, wondering if morning light would make it all seem ordinary. It didn't, not really. The memory just stayed there like a pebble in my shoe. Not painful, just always present, impossible to forget. A thin arc of steam rose from my thermos when I finally pried off the stuck cap. The night seemed to inhale it as it vanished. Brand new thermos, too. Stupid thing. I'd reached for another bottle of coffee when it happened. Small moments like these piled up, making me notice the darkness pressing in around me, like sensing a loose floorboard just before stepping on it. The water near my bowl was mirror smooth, perfectly reflecting the clean scatter of stars above. That's when I spotted something odd. Not a ripple or wake, but a strange patch of brightness on the surface. It looked like someone had laid a sheet of metal on the water, tilted just enough to catch starlight differently. The reflection didn't match the sky's pattern. This patch of light behaved strangely. It moved opposite to my head movements, sliding left when I leaned forward, right when I looked right. That's when the first real flutter of panic hit me. I could feel the float bobbing in sync with my quickening heartbeat. Standing up in my boat, my boots rang hollow against the floor. My headlamp cast a soft cone of light inside the boat, but beyond that circle, everything remained pitch black. The reflection stayed put, a perfect rectangle of light on the water's surface. It was wrong, like an unmarked billboard viewed at an odd angle. Water doesn't hold straight corners unless something's underneath it. I grabbed my cheap field glasses, the ones I use for spotting deer and distant boats. Through the binoculars, that bright plane looked the same until I traced it upward, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The image suddenly shifted. The brightness in the water split apart, and I watched a shape rise against the star-filled sky. Not a plane's oval or a cloud's soft edges, but a sharp, straight corner suggesting something much bigger. It hung there silently for one breath, a dark wedge blocking out the stars, my binocular shaking in my grip. Out on the lake that night, something challenged everything I knew about reality. A wedge appeared in the sky, razor thin, and possibly sharp like a piece of paper held between fingers. When I tried to focus on it through my binoculars, my eyes started burning. The feeling was familiar but wrong, like staring at the sun too long when everything around it warps and distorts. I watched a patch of water split open below it. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the wedge smeared away into nothing, like chalk wiped by a wet finger. Everything else seemed normal. Stars in their proper places, that earlier heron gone without a trace, and the frog still unusually quiet. Water dripped slowly from my oar, and the boat gently knocked against the dock. My first instinct was to rationalize it. Maybe I was tired, maybe it was just a strange reflection. But like everyone does these days, I reached for my phone to take a picture. The camera app lit up, battery indicator glowing reassuringly. The photos I took showed only ordinary stars. No wedge, no strange plane, as if my eyes had been lying. When I checked the gallery, something odd happened. The preview thumbnails glitched for a split second before snapping back to normal. That glitch gave me an uneasy feeling, so I started the motor. I kept the speed low, watching to see if the phenomenon would reappear as we moved. But the lake stayed eerily calm. No wake, no disturbance at all. At the dock, the boards vibrated under my feet as I tied up and unloaded my gear. I felt strangely disconnected, like someone else was wearing my clothes. The drive home followed the familiar two-lane road winding through pine trees, its yellow center line creating a tunnel of light. I drove slowly, headlights on bright, radio silent. The only normal thing was a text from my sister about Sunday's dinner potatoes. A late-night drive after a double shift led me to pull over on Old Mill Road. My head was empty from fluorescent lights and radio noise. That stretch of road belonged to a different kind of darkness. No houses around, ditches on both sides, occasional orange street lamps leaving pools of black between them. With the engine off and only the dash clock glowing, I sat there with my hands on the wheel. That's when I noticed something that didn't fit, a hard corner in the sky. But you can't just tell people about things like that. You have to start small, test the waters with little truths. So later, I made casual comments about weird acting frogs. When my neighbor asked about the fishing, I just said yes. I didn't mention the bright plane that disappeared between stars. I kept the boat keys on the counter when I got home, sat at the kitchen table with my palms flat, fidgeting with the thermos cap. The night plays over and over in my mind. How normal everything felt until suddenly it wasn't. My photos show nothing unusual. I have only the stuck thermos cap, memories of an impossible shape, a heron's wing beat over the lake, and that patch of light on the water like a second sky. Sleep comes poorly now. I reach for the headlamp at odd hours, hoping any light might make the darkness more normal. I go fishing sometimes, like someone returning to where they got lost, hoping the place might remember them. The lake stays ordinary. Stars keep their proper places. Frogs sing like they should. But sometimes, catching a straight line in the dark corner of my kitchen window, I snap my head around like someone called my name. Nothing's ever there. Life goes on as usual. I keep the binoculars in their case next to the old watch, both making perfect sense, neither explaining that rectangle of light that had no business being among the stars. The humid air carried the scent of cut grass mixed with exhaust fumes, while crickets kept up their steady background song. My eyes adjusted to the darkness as I sat there, taking in the quiet night. The first odd thing was that car. I spotted its dim headlight about 2 miles down, crawling toward the intersection. Nothing unusual about a passing car, except this one never made it past the mill's lamppost. The light just disappeared, not gradually, but instantly, like someone had yanked its plug. The silence felt different after that, with even the crickets seeming to pull back their volume. I reached for the radio, telling myself I was being silly. Static hissed through the speakers. The display showed 12:07, and I noted the time carefully, partly to track how long I'd been there, partly to ground myself. Everything about that moment stays sharp in my memory. The warm air, the leather smell inside the car, the steady line of lampposts. Then came the mirror. No warning, just this complete white light filling the entire rear-view mirror. Not like a camera flash or a passing headlight, this was different. It was a soft, steady white that hung there, lighting up the car's interior. I could see everything in that pale glow. The glove box, my steering wheel, even tiny scratches by the gear shift. But when I looked through the back window, the road was empty. Just black asphalt, a ditch, some cattails. No cars, no people, nothing that could have caused that light. I turned around slowly in my seat, trying to get a better look. The angle showed me plenty of the road and embankment. But there was absolutely nothing there. The orange glow from the street lamp behind me made a small pool of light on the pavement, but beyond that, the road just disappeared into darkness. When I faced forward again, the mirror was back to normal. Just a dark rectangle showing an empty road. The dash clock read 12:21. Checking my phone, I saw it was 12:07, just an automatic lock screen time, the kind you glance at without thinking. But the car's dash clock said 12:21. 14 minutes had vanished in a single breath, and I sat there hand-frozen on the stereo knob, staring at the numbers like they might confess something. My watch showed 12:08. I hadn't even closed my eyes for a full minute. The dash clock was the only thing that had jumped forward, and that made no sense. Cold gravel crunched under my shoes as I stepped onto the shoulder, the night air sharp in my throat. I walked around to check the trunk. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. The gym bag, the jumper, undisturbed. No mud, no strange footprints, just mine. The street looked boringly normal. Streetlights hummed overhead, and the ditch swallowed up the darkness. Nothing glowed or pulsed, nothing that could explain why my mirror had turned into some kind of window. My heart was doing that weird flutter thing, like I needed sugar or water, or maybe an ambulance. Back in the driver's seat, I tried to make things feel normal by turning the key. The car took 3 tries to start, nothing unusual, just that lazy battery thing old cars do. I drove off carefully, staying dead center in my lane like I was alone in the world. For 10 minutes, I kept checking the rearview mirror, worried that white light would blast me again. But all I saw was the usual boring road and a tiny orange stray, it like getting smaller in the dark. The dashboard clock behaved after that. My phone's time stayed steady, and the radio, which I'd switched to something dull, came in fine. It felt like everything had clicked back into place, except those missing 14 minutes that only showed up in the car's clock. At home, I double-checked everything. The thermostat hadn't moved. The porch light worked like normal. The world kept going, but those 14 minutes sit with me like old coffee gone stale. It started when I was in my car. The dashboard clock suddenly jumped ahead, showing a time that didn't match my phone or my old analog watch. Both of those read 1:28 steady and sure. I was driving home when it happened. The radio hissed at the same moment a passing car seemed to blink out of existence, and my rearview mirror turned into a white square before returning to normal. Everything else stayed the same. The engine's familiar throb, the road beneath my wheels. When I got home, I tried to act normal. My wife was folding laundry in the living room, asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes and made up a story about taking a long smoke break by the car. I texted a friend about being tired. You look for simple things to hold on to when everything feels off kilter. The timestamps all matched, except for the dash. I called the dealership, wondering if dashboard clocks could just jump like that. The guy suggested it might be a loose connection or a software glitch from an electrical spike. He asked about storms, about other strange happenings. I hesitated before mentioning the white mirror and the blinking car, but he just told me to bring it in for a check. That night, sleep didn't come easy. The next morning, I took the car in. They ran every test they could think of. Scanner, clock check, alternator test, display diagnostics. All they found was one tiny log entry about a time S. Yun-C error they couldn't explain. The tech just shrugged it off as electrical gremlins, probably bad wiring. But I'm writing this because those 14 minutes still don't add up. The dashboard time jumped like someone hit fast forward and broke the film. That white square in the mirror appeared and vanished like a camera shutter. The only thing I know for certain is that I made it home and life continues. Everything else lives in that strange space where unexplainable things hide beneath our everyday reality. I live near Lake Woodson in northern Wisconsin. Tom Granger's my name. It's nothing special, just your basic lake surrounded by trees and cabins. But I've always loved going night fishing there. The peace and quiet, just me with my fishing rod under the stars, that's what draws me out there. My buddy Whiskey, this lazy mutt who'd rather watch the water than swim in it, usually tags along. On this particular Friday in early September, we headed down to the lake around 9:30 p.m. The air felt heavy that night, like a storm was brewing, even though the sky was full of stars. The wind was just strong enough to make the leaves dance and create gentle ripples on the water. We picked our usual spot on the far dock, the one that extends over the lake's deepest part. It's sheltered from the wind by the trees on the opposite shore, keeping the water nice and calm. I got comfortable with my coffee thermos while Whiskey curled up at my feet, barely keeping his eyes open. Everything was normal for about an hour, just the occasional fish splashing or an owl hooting in the distance. Then I spotted something strange, a faint glow beneath the water's surface, maybe 30 feet from where we sat. It wasn't bright, more like a dimmed glow stick floating under the water, barely visible in the darkness. The weird part wasn't just the light itself. A pale greenish white that stayed perfectly still, but how it seemed to float without disturbing the water at all. You'd expect ripples or movement from something in the water, but there was nothing. The light just hung there, like it wasn't even touching the water. These days, I keep my phone face up on the passenger seat, watching it like you'd watch a clock when you need time to ground you. I catch myself checking the rearview mirror at traffic lights, hoping to see something impossible again, just to prove I wasn't imagining things. But it hasn't happened since, and my dashboard numbers stay frustratingly normal. Sometimes I think that's even worse than seeing it again. A strange glow caught my eye while I was fishing at the lake that night. At first I thought it might be bioluminescence or something reflecting off the shore. My dog Whiskey noticed it too, his ears twitching as he stared intently at the same spot. The light began its bizarre ascent from the water, slowly at first, then picking up speed like a bubble rising from the depths. But this was no bubble. It was a smooth, round orb that grew brighter as it climbed, leaving the water surface unnaturally still beneath it. No waves, no ripples, nothing disturbed the lake's perfect calm. I tried capturing it on my phone, dropping my fishing rod in my rush to open the camera. But something strange happened. Every time I aimed at the glowing sphere, my screen went black, as if the phone itself refused to acknowledge what I was seeing. Whiskey's low growl and raised hackles matched the chill I felt, despite the mild evening air. The orb moved with an eerie grace, drifting horizontally away from the dock and following what seemed like an invisible path across the starlit sky. It made no sound as it traveled, maintaining its steady glow until it simply faded away, like someone slowly dimming a light. The whole encounter lasted maybe 2 or 3 minutes. After it vanished, everything felt frozen in time. The lake remained eerily still, with no evidence that anything had disturbed its surface or the sky above. My hands trembled as I reached for my now cold thermos, and Whiskey stayed alert, his ears moving toward every sound from the trees and lake. My phone remained stubbornly dark. I spent the rest of the night watching the sky, but everything returned to normal. Just crickets chirping, wind rustling through trees, and occasional distant splashes. The next day, I told my neighbor Greg, an experienced fisherman who knows every inch of the lake. Though he hadn't seen anything unusual himself, he didn't doubt my story. He just said, "Sometimes the lake has its mysteries, and that part of it." The fall afternoon started like any other walk with Pippa, my mutt, on the trail behind our house near Asheville. The trees were showing their first hints of autumn, splashes of gold and red warning that winter wasn't far off. Working at the bookstore had left me mentally drained that week, so I kept my phone tucked away, wanting just a peaceful walk through the quiet trail where birds and squirrels usually provided the only company. Pippa seemed extra energetic that day, pulling at her leash more than usual. When I finally let her run free, we came to that curved section through the thick trees. That's when everything changed. The object appeared about 50 feet up, just floating there above the treetops, completely silent. Later, I asked around town to make sense of what I'd seen. Elsie, one of the locals, mentioned spotting a dim light by the lake around that time, but dismissed it as kids with flashlights. Nobody else had seen anything unusual. I went through all the logical explanations. Bioluminescent algae, impossible in our freshwater lakes. Boat lights, no boats were out. Fishing equipment, aircraft, nothing fit. The strangest part was how the water stayed perfectly still, even as that glow rose up and drifted away. The air felt wrong that night too. Dense and heavy in a way I can't quite explain. I've returned to the lake several times since then, sometimes bringing whiskey, sometimes not. The atmosphere never feels the same as it did that night. My phone works perfectly fine now, with no more blackouts or dead screens. But Pippa won't go near the dock after dark anymore. She stays by the shore, refusing to look at the water. Whatever that light was, it didn't cause any harm. It simply appeared, moved across the sky, and vanished without leaving any trace. Still, on particularly still nights when the wind is just right, I sometimes catch glimpses of a faint glow lurking beneath the lake's surface, as if it's waiting for something. My day started normally until my phone died in the strangest way. I was out walking when I spotted something in the sky, a massive oval-shaped object, about 10 feet across. Dark and matte, it hovered silently with no lights or markings. Though it resembled a drone, it was unlike any commercial or military model I'd seen before. The moment I tried to take a photo, my phone went completely dead. Not just frozen, totally unresponsive. The portable charger I had didn't help, and no amount of button pressing brought it back to life. All this time, that craft just hung there motionless, as if watching. It gave me an eerie feeling, like my skin was crawling. My dog Pippa seemed unbothered, which helped keep me calm. Still, something felt off, and I decided to head back to the trailhead. The object didn't move or make any sound as I walked away, repeatedly looking over my shoulder. Even when I reached my car in the clearing, my phone remained dead. Back home around 6:30 p.m. as the sun was setting, I tried troubleshooting the phone. And nothing seemed physically wrong. No water damage or cracks, but it wouldn't power on. I left it charging overnight, hoping that would help. When morning came and it still wouldn't work, I took it to my tech-savvy friend Leah. Despite trying everything from hard resets to computer connections, she couldn't revive it. I spent that day searching online for similar drone sightings near Asheville, but found nothing, no news reports, police records, or forum discussions. Then, about an hour later, something unexpected happened. While I sat staring at the dead phone on my coffee table, it suddenly came back to life, screen flickering before fully booting up. The forest was perfectly normal that fall morning, crisp air, leaves starting to change, sun climbing slowly in the sky. I was doing my usual solo hike, enjoying the quiet that comes with hitting the trails midweek. That's how I like it. Just me and nature. No distractions. My phone was off and packed away, though I kept my unplugged earbuds in my ears out of habit. I prefer listening to the actual forest sounds anyway. About an hour into my walk, something strange happened. I started hearing noises through my earbuds. Not music, but this weird static-like sound with a rhythm to it. It was like catching fragments of a conversation in some unknown language, all garbled and electronic, similar to those alien communication scenes in sci-fi movies. The sound was faint at first, but it definitely shouldn't have been possible since my phone was turned off and zipped away in my pack. After that day, everything seemed off. My phone started acting up with random glitches. The camera app would crash suddenly. The flashlight would turn on by itself. Nothing major, but definitely unsettling. When I checked my phone right after the incident, everything looked normal. All my apps, photos, and messages were exactly as I love. F them. I initially blamed it on battery issues, but the timing was too suspicious. Pippa noticed something was wrong too. She became extremely nervous around that trail, staring at the trees with her hackles up and making these low growls I'd never heard before. She even completely refused to go on the trail once. I went back several times looking for that craft, but found nothing. No strange lights, no unusual sounds, just regular forest noises. Whatever I encountered that day clearly didn't want to be found. It was content just observing, leaving me with questions I still can't answer. The whole experience simply doesn't add up, and I'm not sure it ever will. The noise started faint but unmistakable through my earbuds while I was hiking. At first, I thought they were still connected to my phone, but when I checked, they were completely unplugged, just hanging loose in my hands. The strange thing was, the sound didn't stop. It came right back when I put them in again. It wasn't random static or interference. These were rhythmic sounds like voices having a conversation, but definitely not human ones. They had a pattern, a deliberate quality that made my skin crawl. I kept walking, telling myself I was just tired or hearing things, but the sounds persisted, clear and methodical. The forest around me felt different too. The air grew thick and heavy, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. I looked for other hikers, someone who might be playing a prank, but the trail was completely empty. Just trees and dimming afternoon light surrounded me. Then everything changed in an instant. The mysterious sounds cut off, and the forest fell into an unnatural silence. No birds, no wind in the leaves, nothing. When I finally took the earbuds out and put them away, it was like breaking a spell. The normal forest sounds rushed back. Birds calling, leaves rustling, wind, oving through the trees. I hurried back along the main trail, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. Something felt off, like something was following just beyond my sight. By the time I reached my car, darkness had settled in and the parking lot lights were on. My phone showed nothing unusual. No weird signals, no missed calls, nothing to explain what I'd heard. What bothers me most is how deliberate it all felt. Those sounds weren't random. They seemed like something trying to communicate through my unplugged earbuds. It was as if something lingered just past what I could perceive, attempting to reach out without fully revealing itself. I've never been one to get spooked easily, but this experience was different. Now, I'm not sure I'll hike that trail alone again. Last year, I got into night sky time-lapse photography. As a photographer focusing on landscapes and nature, it felt like a natural progression. I never gave much thought to anything supernatural. Sure, I loved stargazing and tracking satellites, but that was about it. Then something happened that I still can't explain. My home is in Eastport, a small coastal town in northern Maine. One clear, cold night in October, I decided to do another time-lapse shoot. The ocean fog had just cleared out, leaving the air crisp but slightly damp. I was hoping to capture the Milky Way, maybe even get lucky with some northern lights. I set everything up in the side yard camera, on the tripod, pointed just above the tree line, programmed to take a shot every 10 seconds for 4 hours. Then I left it to do its thing overnight. The next morning, I downloaded the images and started combining them into a video. At first, everything looked normal. Stars moving across the sky, occasional clouds drifting by. Then something caught my eye. There was this oval shape in the middle of the frame, sort of like a balloon-o. It was barely visible at first, dark against the night sky, but then it started to do something strange. While the stars moved normally, this thing just hovered there, rotating slowly. The colors were what really got me. This shape started changing colors, deep blue to eerie green, then to dull orange, over and over. It wasn't like any aircraft lights I'd ever seen. Planets don't glow like that, and drones don't behave that way either. I rushed outside to look, but the sky was completely normal. No unusual lights or shapes anywhere. I showed the footage to my friend Lena, who works as a wildlife biologist. She knows her tech stuff and suggested it might be a camera glitch or light reflection. I wanted to believe her explanation, but something about the footage just didn't add up. That night, I set up my camera again. Same spot, same settings. It started with Luna's unusual behavior. My border collie, mixed normally calm and collected, grew restless one night, her sharp eyes fixed on the tree line as she sniffed the ground anxiously. The air carried hints of salt and pine, and around midnight, a low hum emerged, similar to distant power lines or a passing plane. The camera first caught it then, a strange shape in the sky, rotating and giving off a faint glow in muted, pastel-like colors. Luna's reaction was immediate, a low growl as she stared toward the water. I looked but saw nothing with my naked eyes. The phenomenon continued nightly for a week. The shape would appear somewhere in the frame, spinning and changing colors. Its position varied, sometimes near the horizon, other times almost directly overhead. What struck me while reviewing the footage was the irregular rotation, switching between clockwise and counterclockwise movements, while the stars maintained their steady eastward drift. Local weather radar and flight paths offered no explanation. Luna's unease persisted through these nights. She'd stick close to me, ears twitching at sounds beyond my hearing range. Finally, I decided to investigate further, setting up a second camera with a zoom lens and bringing out my binoculars. As fog rolled in from the harbor, I waited with Luna curled beside me. The shape appeared at 11:45 p.m., bringing a noticeable drop in temperature. Through the binoculars, it appeared strangely blurry, as if viewed through heat waves. The colors cycled from deep green to blue to dull amber, accompanied by a strange pulsating glow that resembled breathing. It moved slowly without sudden jumps, but the zoom camera struggled to capture it clearly. The edges distorted and pixelated mysteriously. For half an hour, I watched, feeling oddly observed in return. The shape eventually drifted upward and vanished, leaving behind buzzing street lamps and a whimpering Luna. The next day's review revealed something unsettling. The zoom lens camera had gaps in its footage, several minutes simply missing. The footage from my main time-lapse camera seemed normal enough, but something wasn't right. I kept reviewing it over and over, searching for anything, a drone, a balloon, a person, but found nothing. The mysterious shape defied explanation. It never cast shadows on the clouds or reflected light like ordinary objects. On overcast nights, it vanished completely. The strangeness escalated gradually. Streetlights would flicker when the shape appeared. My phone would lose signal or suddenly restart. I began noticing other oddities too, like the warm battery pack that hadn't been charging, and the motion sensor by the back door that picked up movement at 2:30 a.m., only to be found dead the next morning. One evening after finishing my diner shift, I went to check the camera in the side yard. The night was clear and cold, stars shining netly above. Luna sat beside me, her tail twitching as we watched. The shape appeared on the horizon, rotating more slowly than usual. Its surface rippled like water, and the colors shifted and cycled. It cast an eerie glow on nearby pine trees, but nowhere else. When part of it briefly turned transparent, I tried to capture it with my phone, but the photo showed only empty darkness where the shape should have been. My sleep became disturbed with fragmented dreams of light, color, and cold wind. Luna grew increasingly nervous, barking at shadows and pacing inside the house. When I reviewed the previous night's time-lapse footage, the entire sky went black for 15 seconds mid-clip, then returned to normal, but the stars hadn't moved. Sometimes I could feel a presence nearby, like the air had thickened, accompanied by a low vibration in the ground. The strangest part was that no one else seemed to notice. My neighbors went about their lives as usual, and nothing appeared on the news. It was just Luna and me, watching as the nights grew heavier with unexplained phenomena. It started with an old Zenith radio, a garage sale find with its wooden frame and that lingering smell of cigarette smoke in the dial. After retiring from the engineering firm, I'd kept up my decades-long hobby of tinkering with radios. It gave my hands something to do, kept my mind busy. The first signal came through at exactly 11:47 p.m. 3 clear tones, beep, 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 then nothing but static. I checked the time because it's just something I always do at that hour. The local AM station had been humming along quietly until those tones cut through. I wrote it down, thinking it was just some interference or a transmitter hiccup. But then it happened again the next night. Same time, same 3 tones. And the next night. And every night after that. The pattern never broke. 11:47 p.m., 3 tone, sent in. Silence. I started keeping detailed logs, dates, weather conditions, anything that might matter. Nothing else ever changed. The precision of it was uncanny. The tones only came if I had the radio set to that exact frequency at that exact minute. I had to use a timer to stay awake for it. Miss that minute, and you'd miss the signal entirely. Switch stations, and the tones wouldn't come. It was like clockwork that only moved once every day. Now I sit here questioning everything. The long, cold nights spent watching, Luna's ears perk toward the horizon, like she's expecting something to return. I see the footage over and over, that slow rotation, those color shifts, that strange rippling in the sky. Sometimes I wonder if my mind made it all up, if the loneliness played tricks on me. But Luna keeps watching, and I keep pointing my camera upward, hoping to catch something that finally makes sense. For now, there's just me, my restless dog, and a sky full of secrets I can't quite grasp. Every night at exactly 11:47, my old Zenith radio would pick up these strange tones. None of my other radios could catch them, not my transistor, digital set, or even the shortwave receiver. They'd just crackle with static, while the Zenith played those clear, distinct signals. I tried getting answers from the local AM station, but they brushed it off. The technician just laughed and suggested it was interference or someone playing tricks. But I knew it was something else, something real. The signals became my obsession. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to take notes, much to my family's concern. I started recording the tones on an old cassette recorder, and they came through perfectly, pure and steady, but there was something else too. After the tones, I'd hear this faint whisper, like wind in a far-off tunnel. Strangely, this whisper never showed up on my recordings. I lived in a quiet neighborhood on the town's outskirts, with just a few police radio towers and the local AM station miles away. I tried to track where the signal came from, but couldn't find any pattern or direction. It was a mystery that kept pulling me deeper. Then came that one clear, still evening. I was sitting on my porch, waiting for the usual time, Right at 11:47, the three tones played through the radio. That's when I saw it. A soft blue-green light hovering in the distance, maybe 2 miles away. It wasn't like any aircraft light, no movement, no blinking, no noise. Just a steady glow that disappeared when I blinked. After that night, I couldn't tell myself it was just some radio interference anymore. The old Zenith radio from 1953 became my window to something unexplainable. It was the only one that picked up those strange tones built with tubes and dials from a different era. Every night at 11:47, they'd come through like clockwork, until they didn't. My notes showed the time shifting slightly. 11:46 some nights, 11:48 on others. I knew I'd been careful with the timing, but there it was in my own handwriting. It made me doubt my observations, my sense of time, everything. One morning, I found these notes scattered on the floor near the radio. I couldn't remember knocking them over, though maybe I'd sleepwalked. The static held secrets. Sometimes it shifted into patterns that almost sounded like Morse code, but nothing I could nail down. Then came the whispers, broken, barely formed words that vanished if I tried to record them. A presence grew stronger with each passing night, like distant eyes watching me through the static. The radio seemed to have a mind of its own. One night, the tones didn't show up at all. I discovered the radio had changed stations by itself, filling the room with static. When I set it back, the tones returned the next night. It felt like some kind of receiver catching signals from somewhere beyond reach, or maybe something out there was trying to reach me. That nagging feeling of not being alone never went away. It wasn't scary, exactly, more like an uncomfortable awareness, pushing me to solve this puzzle. My wife suggested moving the radio to another room, but I knew this old Zenith was special. My friends just laugh when I tell them about it, and my son thinks I'm wasting my time. But I keep listening, keeping the radio tuned to that frequency, waiting for those three tones each night. There's no pattern to make sense of, no clear answers, just mysteries wrapped in static. The alarm on my bedside watch reminds me it's almost time again, and I can't help thinking back to that inexplicable night. I still question my sanity sometimes, but I know when I saw it was real. It was during my drive home from the hospital in Spokane, around 2 a.m. on a clear early spring night. The air had that particular quality, crisp and cold, but holding on to traces of the day's warmth. My radio hummed quietly, and I had the windows cracked just enough to keep the stuffiness at bay. The roads were practically deserted when I first noticed it, about 20 minutes into my journey. I just passed the last stretch of streetlights where the highway opens up to fields. That's when I spotted the light in the sky, moving downward with an unnatural slowness. This wasn't your typical meteor shower star. Those streak across the sky in a flash. This light just floated down straight as an arrow. I tried telling myself it was just my tired eyes playing tricks, or maybe some weird reflection from the city lights. But there it was, hanging silently a few hundred feet up, completely motionless. The strange part wasn't just how it moved, it was the total silence. No atmospheric noise, no crackling, absolute, entirely nothing. The light itself was unusual too. Not harsh or bright, but a gentle amber glow that stayed steady without any flickering. Though I strained to make out its shape, it remained just a luminous blur in the distance. Then came the most bizarre part. It shot straight up into the darkness above the trees, moving faster than anything I'd ever seen, yet still completely silent. My heart raced as I checked my rearview mirror, hoping to see another car, another witness, but the road stretched empty behind me. Later, when I told my roommate Sarah about it, she brushed it off as a satellite or drone. But I've seen both, and neither moves like that, especially not at that height, and certainly not that quietly. I'm not sure what I witnessed that night, but I know it wasn't anything ordinary. Nothing unusual happened in the days that followed, just normal stars above and the usual sparse traffic on my drives home, but that strange light had changed something in me. I found myself constantly looking skyward during my nighttime commute, searching for another glimpse of whatever I'd seen. Small oddities started piling up, making it harder to dismiss that night as just fatigue after a long shift. My phone began acting up with dropped calls and random screen flickers. The clock radio by my bed kept resetting to 2 a.m. The apartment lights would briefly dim, though the building never lost power. At first, I tried to rationalize it all away. I'm not someone who scares easily. The more I dwelled on that light, though, the more it bothered me. I checked satellite tracking apps, looked up flight paths. Nothing explained what I'd witnessed. No aircraft, no satellites, nothing that could account for that silent descent, that hovering pause, and that sudden upward surge. I wanted to write it off as exhaustion playing tricks on my mind, but I couldn't shake the memory, or the growing unease it left behind. I need the full original text in order to rewrite and restructure it. What you provided appears to be just the beginning of a longer piece. Could you please share the complete text you'd like me to restructure?